Chair Pinkerton to have your
same.
board
Do the same.
do the same.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. We really do appreciate having this opportunity to come talk with you all about items that are important to both of us. So, first item of business would be to call this meeting to order for the County Commission, and if there are no changes to the agenda, to approve the agenda. A motion second. Any discussion? Any public discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
All right, would the Newberry City Commission care to make a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion from Commissioner Martin and a second from Commissioner Farnsworth. Any comments on the agenda? Does the public have any comments on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Can we invite Pastor Jess Carter from the Newberry Church of Christ back to the podium? He's pulling double duty for us tonight to provide our invocation. Then would everybody please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Let us pray. Dear Almighty God, we thank you so much for the opportunity for these two groups and board of our citizens and our elected officials to be here tonight. Be with them as they join together, that they might do what is best, not only for this town and this county, but also that they might encourage one another. Be with us all, that we might listen, that they may also listen to us as we plan what is best and what we think should be and need to be done for this city and also this county. We pray now that you be with every member, every citizen, and help us that we might trust in you and look to you for help and love. Help us to be with one another in kindness. We ask all of this in the Son of Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Carter. We appreciate it. I'd like to add my welcome to yours as well. Thank you guys all for coming out here again. I know that we look forward to these chats, these ability to all get together. So with that, we will.
Okay, now you got to tell the truth.
It's fun, right? With that, we will begin. And I think your county staff is up first to give us an update on the county roads that are being chip sealed.
And y'all had the opportunity to get the backup, didn't you? So y'all have had
We
the chance
did.
to see it, and I know that we have. So hopefully it doesn't have to be a real long presentation.
Actually, my presentation, Commissioner, is very short. Ramon de Valera, the Public Works Director, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Just a little update on the chip seal projects that have been going on here in Newberry. 226 and 202, the first layer of chip seal has been completed. We were hoping to be able to do the second layer before the watermelon run starts. We're still hoping to be able to do that next week, if weather permits. So 226 and 207 will be arranged for not completing after this week. We'll be able to finish those two next week. The fog seal will be done after the watermelon run. Northwest second half, actually our staff will have again there today again, and we're working on driveways, and there's about 30 more roads after that. Overall, we expect that we'll be completely done with those three roads in the next 1.5 months, again, fine cycle weather. Everything was fine with that. So, we finish with those three roads, we complete the chip seals, in the city, and for now, we'll be going back. That's my update.
Okay.
Any questions that I've raised? I know it's other things that Mr. Perry will take things.
Okay. Y'all have any questions about those specific roads? Okay. The bigger discussion, Mr. Harriet is going to lead the way. Yeah, you've already told us that you know about that.
Is you got a little green light on there on the mic, then you'll be
Oh, okay.
fired up and everybody can
There we
hear
go.
you.
Commissioners, last week, Mr. New came out to see me. We sat down and we had a discussion over exchanging roadways. As you know, this has been a topic of discussion for quite some time. I'll have our clerk hand out a map just so you can see it. It might be easier than seeing the PowerPoint. This PowerPoint was in the agenda package for the board, and we've even made some very slight revisions today to it. Let's see. As I mentioned, Mr. New and I met. We talked about an agreement that could replace the 5 or 6 agreements that we have for the networks of unimproved roads in the city of Newberry. Right now, it's an agreement where the city of Newberry maintains a lot of the roads that the county has jurisdictional responsibility over. We do that through an agreement that allows the city to opt out of the agreement with a 30-day notice. You maintain those roads at a higher level of standard than we would. I think you about a 3-to-1 ratio, you grade them more often than we do. The proposed agreement would change that, and it would shift the jurisdictional responsibility. In basic terms, it would shift the jurisdictional responsibility over to the city of Newberry once the county chip sealed those. So for the county to transfer those roads over, we would do a certain chip seal standard, much like Mr. Gavarete was talking about, and then those roads would become the city of Newberry's to maintain into the future. Southwest 46th Avenue, you can see it there pretty much in the middle of the map, runs east-west between County Road 337 and Southwest 202nd Street, would be a county maintenance responsibility. It's a regional road. It stretches from basically the county line into almost into Jonesville area, and it travels more regional traffic. The city would also on these roads contribute a portion of the chip sealing cost if those if the road was exited the county jurisdiction and went into the city jurisdiction, we would cooperate on the funding for that. The transfer of the future roadways, so as the network grew or as roadways were annexed, at least 75% of the roadway frontage would be annexed into the city. That would be a trigger to go over to the transfer the road from the county to the city, provided the road at a minimum has been chip sealed by the county. So that's the trigger for the future roadway network. As you annex into areas, once the county chip seals those would become city roadways. There would be no time requirement on this. There is a financial consideration, and it is a considerable. So basically, you're working under the status quo agreement, the way the agreement is right now, into the future. Southwest 30th Avenue is a little bit different because of its conditions. And then during the duration, this status quo approach would be used during the duration of the gas tax interlocal agreement that was just recently adopted. This is the list of the roads as they stand right now, about 18.9 miles. The roadway on the left in the limits, but basically the county would be chip sealing these roadways. You notice Mr. Gavarete talked about a couple of those on the list already, but the county would be chip sealing those roads and turning those roads over to the city once they're chip sealed to the agreed upon standard. The cost to do that's about $978,000 to the county, and they're, like I said, if that roadway crosses into the city's jurisdiction already, we would cooperate on the funding of that if the city maintained those roads. Southwest 226th and 186th Street are currently being chip sealed, and Southwest 15th Avenue requires some improvement before that one would take place and transfer in jurisdiction.
Excuse me, and the roads that you guys are chip sealing, those deeds could be moved over as soon as they're completed. So that would be a certain mileage there that would happen instantaneously.
Correct.
Okay.
And shortly behind that, I would imagine 215th could work over. It's already been chip sealed, but it needs some repair work in certain areas, and we'll call it cleanup or something like Mr. New and I was talking about. These are the roadways where the city would contribute to the chip seal project. As indicated, those are roads that you're responsible for, have jurisdiction over, and they link up to county roads. It's about a $580,000 bill, so $900,000 plus $500,000. Total bill for all this chip sealing is about $1.4 million. Hence the reason it's going to take some time to get into this if the Board of County Commissioners of the city decides to move forward with that. This is just maps. That's pretty much the conclusion of my presentation. These are just maps of where these roadways are, so you can kind of see them laid out. I won't bother you with that because I'm sure you know where most of them are. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So staff is happy with the agreement that y'all have come up with?
Yes, sir.
It's been a
Mr.
year in
Chair.
the making.
We are happy with it. It's fairly simple. I can tell you the precedent for it is at every level of government. Having tried to turn over roads to the state, it's essentially the same type of arrangement. You bring it up to the certain agreed upon standards. Both parties agree to make the transfer once those standards are made. I think we can move forward with it, and staff would recommend it. County staff would recommend it to the county commission that it's a good approach. And it covers the fact that it allows you to work it into your capital improvement program over the future.
And the other component would be, as far as when annexations take place, what happens with the roads, but that's a separate issue that will be dealt with as, when we have the discussion about annexations.
Yes, but this does work into that, because if the city of Newberry annexed into an area and it had county maintained unimproved roads, and that annexation covered 75% of the frontage of the road, and the county chip sealed it, it would also move over to the city of Newberry. So there is a set of clauses. I say
Okay.
clauses. We don't have an agreement written yet. It's a set of concepts that cover that. At this point, we don't need a vote or an endorsement if you agree with this. Just kind of the consensus that you're in agreement with it. You'll send staff back to work on these items. But
Hutch.
yes, we believe it covers
Mike
both
first.
bases.
Thank you, and I guess I just don't understand it well enough yet to know whether or not I agree with it conceptually. I'm not going to go into all the questions I have, but just a few questions. Using this map that was passed out, are all of the roads that are either City of Newberry or Alachua County responsibility included in these totals?
There are more roads on the ground than there are included in those totals. These are the major roadways throughout the city-county arrangement. There are local unimproved roads that still may be county maintained, but they're local. Those would fall under the same terms of this type of agreement. But right now, these are the ones at the forefront. These are the most heavily traveled roads and the major roadways throughout the city.
So the legend here that says County Road Newberry maintains 13.85 miles, etc. If you add all those up, the total number of roads that one of the two of us is responsible for is greater than that number.
Yes.
And is it your intention that all the roads would be covered by this agreement, or just a subset of roads that we specify in this agreement?
The intention is that the agreement would cover all the roads if necessary. It's a framework for covering all the roads that you would want to cover for transferring from the county to the city. The framework is there to do that. The first part of the agreement, though, is the specific roads in the list.
Okay, so this discussion, the discussion has morphed somewhat and gotten bigger. It kind of started with roads that the county is maintaining and that we felt the city should be maintaining, having annexed most or all of it. City doesn't necessarily agree. We went back and forth, and I believe we jointly tasked our staff with coming up with a list of the roads that we're talking about, and then some criteria that we could both agree to that would allow us to determine who should be doing it. And the new variable is this issue of chip sealing, which, we don't chip seal anymore. We don't have a budget for that. We don't have a program. And so we've kind of moved from who should be responsible for the road to what is it going to take to get you to be responsible for the road, which in my mind is getting a little bit ahead of the game, so I'm still trying to understand what the consequences of that would be. If I understand this proposed agreement correctly, if we don't chip seal anything, then no transfer of maintenance responsibility would occur. Is that correct?
No transfer of jurisdictional responsibility would occur. maintenance responsibility would still be covered by the interlocals. If the city decided to maintain those interlocal or maintain those roadways and continue to do so, probably be done as has been done in the history at a higher level of service than the county does, with a 30-day notice to opt out of that if the city so chooses. That's the way the interlocals have worked in the past. This discussion's been going on for several years over who maintains these roads. The city maintains them at a slightly higher level than the county would. The city can opt out. The county doesn't want the city to opt out. The city wanted to see more income to maintain the roads at a higher standard. The county's position was the roads were being maintained at a higher standard at the choice of the city, and it was just a back and forth. This at least provides a mechanism to move the road from one jurisdiction control to another. The previous agreements never did that. They just addressed the maintenance aspect of the roadway. This actually changes ownership of the roadway.
And I'm just trying to understand whether or not the conditions under which the transfer of ownership would occur is fair to all the taxpayers, including the unincorporated area residents. Of course, if the city did not maintain the roads at a higher level of service, the county would not take that over if they stop. We would just continue to maintain them the way we do all graded roads in the county, which is at more of a rural level of service. They are largely rural areas. Probably most of the areas that we're talking about now are largely rural, and that's how the county would maintain them. The city annexed into those areas. Their citizens that are now in the city are demanding a higher level of service, and the city is responding by providing a higher level of service, and that's fine. More power to the city of Newberry. But I don't believe that it's the county's responsibility to make up that deficit if the city should decide to stop doing that. Go ahead.
Madam Manager, would you like to say something?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, I was only going to state that, of course, with an interlocal, we know we can't bind future boards. And so we can tie an interlocal to certain things that if an interlocal is canceled, there are certain potential penalties there. We've talked about tying the maintenance to the gas tax. So if Newberry stopped maintaining, that we could change that formula. But a transfer of ownership is permanent. I mean, the deed transfers over, and there's long-term benefit to that. So that's really the difference in the big difference with the maintenance by interlocal versus transferring ownership.
And that's the part I'm interested in, is the transfer, the permanent transfer of ownership. This discussion, rightly in my mind, has become linked with the CRA discussion, because it ultimately boils down to what do taxpayers pay, who's responsible for what should they be responsible for. And in my opinion, with annexation comes responsibility on the part of the city to provide an enhanced level of service. It's not the county's responsibility. So I'm not there yet. I have some more questions. I'm going to think about this some more. One thing that I would like our staff to be prepared to answer when this comes back to the county commission for consideration is, if we were to fire up a paving program again and begin paving roads in order to get the city of Newberry to accept ownership of the roadways, when would the county taxpayers recoup their costs? If we pave a road, and then how much are we spending on it annually right now to grade it? When could they expect? Because in my mind, that's what this discussion is about. Who should pay for the road maintenance? That's the only aspect of it I'm really interested in. And again, this is a solution. I don't think it really gets to the problem that city and county kind of deadlocked on before. We kind of paused at the point where I thought the county was kind of complaining that some of the roads that have been largely annexed, we were still maintaining. The city seemed to acknowledge that, yes, you do have some responsibility for that. We need to agree on a formula. And we sent y'all off to come up with the formula. And that's the last thing I remember us doing. So now I'm seeing a formula, but there's this new piece to it, again, which obligates the county to pave a road, which we're not doing now. Again, we would be firing up a special deal for the city of Newberry. And I'm not sure what the consequences in the rest of the county would be if we do that. That's the condition now for continuing discussion we were having about who should be responsible for these annexed road segments. So again, I'm not sure that I'm happy with the proposed solution, but I'll wait and hear what everyone else has to say. Thank you.
Hutch?
Well, I think this is a great start, and I've got a couple of kind of minor questions I think is strong. The first has to do with
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, just a little bit, but we haven't run numbers on it. You know, if the city were to annex to the center of a county line road, to the center line, and they only annexed the one side, that's 50% of the roadway network. So they would have to come to the other side, and that's how it's worked in the past, and that's how it would work under this formula, the 75% number. There are a couple of roads where half the road, you know, the north half or the south half is maintained by one or two of the jurisdictions, and we think this would start to clear that up a little bit, and it makes sense to do that, just from a grading standpoint.
Just as long as there's no surprises that Swiss cheese funds, the source of the funding, I assume is all gas tax. You know, you get the money and you put back the gas tax.
Yes, sir.
Let's say that we consider this a precedent for the other municipalities as well. What is our capacity? Let's say we start lining up, all the ones that can do this, I suppose, a number of others. Is there a practical capacity issue where we need to start ranking projects that other municipalities?
Mr. Chair, right now this is the one on the forefront. It's the only one on the front burner. It may generate some interest from the other municipalities, and at that point we'd have to bring you probably a prioritization or a CIP project type list every year during your capital improvement discussion.
There's a lot of potentially across Sumio to figure out whether there's any drainage improvements, additional signage, pumpkin driveway connections that need to be fixed, these issues. So consider all of that part of the cost, the chip sealing, doing all that stuff,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, yes. We can always have Mr. Gavarete doesn't want to come up. He's nodding his head emphatically. Yes, all of that's included in the chip sealing.
Well, do we assume this will become an agreement that we put on to the other municipalities, once we've got the model worked out here?
Absolutely. I think it's a good framework for an agreement working with the other municipalities, and just for the interest of the public, because on the surface it looks like, oh, the county's got to spend money to turn the road over to the municipality, and we are talking about ownership, jurisdictional responsibility. This isn't a maintenance agreement; it's actual ownership of the roadway. As the county, if the city of Newberry had walked into the door and said to the county, we want you to take over this roadway, I have to admit, I'd be saying the same thing, and making the same recommendation to the county, that the city of Newberry bring that road up to some agreed standard and turn it back over to the county. I know the state would do that. I know I'm sure the city of Gainesville would do that as the larger municipality. It's a precedent that's set statewide if you're turning infrastructure like roadways over to each other.
You said the action that you're looking for is language for us to, bless the idea, the concept, you have to do that,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Just kind of a conceptual nod that you want us to proceed with this. Obviously, the devil's in the details, and there is no detail in a PowerPoint. That's all coming in the agreements, and once you turn it over to the policy staff is one thing. Once it gets into the attorney's hands, that's when things really start getting worked out and detailed.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hutch, before you move on with your line of questioning, before we get too far away, could you speak to what the county's stance would be about your standards for upgrading before you would consider taking over ownership? What would you ask of the state? Would chip sealing be your standard?
Well, if the road were coming from the state to the county, there's not a lot we could say about it. They're just going to hand it over lock, stock, and barrel probably to us. Yeah.
Couple hundred miles.
If we were moving the roadway from the county jurisdiction up to the state jurisdiction, I'm certain, because I've had these discussions before, the state would want it brought up to their standards. The county
And their
would-
standards would be?
extreme.
And before we get too far away from the comment that you just made, because it's our understanding that was clarified in our last joint meeting that annexation has no bearing on transferring the deeds to the roads. That was stated by your county staff last time. That's still true, right? Okay, just wanted, because it
yes.
seemed like you implied that there was the ability to just annex over and just force, and that we have already established that that's not true.
That's correct.
Okay, that's not the case. All right, just want to make sure I had clarified that point.
To finish your question though, from a city to a county, if we were talking about, I'm sure, it's a difficult question to answer because we haven't had the policy discussion. Nobody's come to us saying, here, take this road other than the state. But if a city were to come to the county, we would talk about some certain standard we'd expect the roadway to be brought up into. In other words, I don't want to take over somebody's problems, is basically
Thank you.
the way we would talk about that.
I apologize
And Mr.
for
New and
the
I've talked about
interruption, Commissioner
a
Hutch.
standard in there. Chip sealing is not, it's
It's a
not pavement.
compromise.
It's a compromise
It's a
standard,
compromise.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the only other thing is when I mentioned drainage, Newberry's got its, in this case, it's 99% private drive. In cases where we, deal with live streaming crossings, how affect the expenses, not in the chip seal, but in the crossings in some cases. So
Commissioner's correct, and, we don't, right now, Mr. Gavarete is working on a couple of roads from a county standard standpoint, and I can assure you he's making sure the drainage works, because you don't want to lose the road later, and we're just a few miles to the east of here. It's, we can't run away from you if we do it wrong, so that's kind of the thought process we have.
Commissioner Cornell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, Commissioners, I quite like the standard, the concept. I think it makes a lot of sense. I try to think of things simply, which is as you annex and you have roads, if the county can upgrade the standard to an agreed upon standard, chip seal, you take on the roads and the ownership. I quite like that. I wish the city of Gainesville would take 16th Avenue, and I wish they'd take 43rd Street. And we've had that discussion with them, and we'll continue to have that discussion with them, but I like that concept, and that's what this concept is. Unfortunately, this board has used all its chip seal money with the last gas tax and has taken the approach that we're not going to have a chip seal program going forward. So my question is more about what I think Commissioner Hutchinson was getting to, which is capacity. What is our capacity? And so you had mentioned that the length of this agreement, whereby we would have the opportunity to transfer roads to the city, and they would generously take them to under the assumption that we upgraded them, would be under the length of term as the new gas tax that we just signed with the city, and that's 10 years?
10 years, correct.
Okay, and so as you all know, we got a suggestion from your manager about modifying that gas tax, which we did. And I think the city of Newberry was the beneficiary of that. How much more did the city of Newberry get when we made that change for that gas tax formula for 10 years?
You want me to? I'll let
Maybe
the
you know,
manager-
Mr. Mayor, or maybe.
Well, in 6 years' time, we will be made whole. What's the number though, Mike, in 6 years?
We increased our revenues by $125,000 a year, and that begins in 2 years at 20% a year, and after 6 years, we'll receive the full benefit.
Okay, so I'm gonna do some quick math. Last 4 years, 125 is $500,000, and then 20%. So we're talking about, do you know the total amount of benefit that Newberry's getting over 10 years? Is it around 700? 750?
The total chip seal benefit would be in just a hair under 1.3 million, but some of that is sunk already in roads that have already been chip sealed. So that'd be the value
No,
of
I'm
the
sorry,
transfer.
my question wasn't clear. So over the 10-year period of the gas tax, which is what we're talking about now, this agreement over 10 years, what's the additional money Newberry's getting based on the change that this board took, the action we took last month or 2 months ago?
I do not know the cumulative value of the 10-year period because of the step-in process. I mean, it is a math problem, but I would just say from a staff perspective, we look at loft as maintenance money.
Yep.
And so we feel like that we started this issue 3 years ago we're maintaining roads, but we're not being compensated for them. So the commission graciously agreed to compensate us for moving forward. That begins in 2 years and is complete in 6 years. But that doesn't handle enhancement or construction type money moving forward. But I think the total value of that over the 10-year period is probably going to land somewhere in the $500,000 range.
Well, the last 4 years would be $500,000 because 125,000 times 4 is $500,000. So what's the first 6 years?
20% of 125 in 2 years.
It's 20%
And then
Yeah,
20
probably
years
around-
and
okay.
40% for 2 years
Right.
and 60% for 2 years and
Okay.
80% for 2 years and
Right.
the balance.
So, I mean, where I'm going with commissioners is I very much want to try to make this work. It obviously just comes down to dollars from my perspective. And if a majority of this board wants to reinitiate the chip seal program, then we would, over the next 10 years, have to figure out county-wide, after talking to the other municipalities, what's our capacity? To Hutch's point, what is our capacity and how much of our gas tax do we want to dedicate to chip seal? We had originally talked about $500,000 per year, which over 10 years, using simple math, is $5 million. You know, could we commit to $1 million of that to the city of Newberry? It's a question. I don't know. And this agreement doesn't obligate us, but I think if we're going down this road, I think we should have a real commitment to either getting this done or deciding that we don't want to do chip seal as a board. I guess that's kind of a policy discussion. I'm happy to move this forward, Hutch, if you make a motion, because again, I like the concept. I like very much turning roads over to cities who want the roads and will maintain them. I think that shows real good faith on both sides. And long term, you know, thinking 50 years, it makes a lot of sense because these are going to be roads that need to be maintained over decades, not just over a handful of years. For us, it's really what can we commit to from a chip seal program county-wide over the next 10 years? Right now, that number that this board has decided based on our most recent discussion is 0. And so we as a board have to decide that we're going to do something more than 0. If cities are incentivizing us to do something, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate you all bringing that forward. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Complete. Madam Manager, would you like to say something?
Mr. Chair, just two quick things. One, I do see this as a little bit of a different animal than what we've been talking about with the chip seal program. We've been talking about the chip seal of our unincorporated areas and whether we continue with that and on what criteria. This would be more of a municipal chip seal program, so to speak, as a means to an end, to divest ourselves of future responsibility for these roadways which lie wholly within these municipalities, or to share in responsibility where they may cross through both jurisdictions. So I see it as a little bit of a different animal than what we've talked about with the chip seal program overall. But secondly, we do have a lot of our own road projects moving forward, and so we will have some material. I was just mentioning that with Mr. Harriet. We will have some material as these road projects progress that we can use in chip seal projects as well. 43rd is one.
Mr. Harriet, may I ask a couple questions? It says the way this slide is highlighted, it's roadway summary, roadways where a city would contribute to chip seal projects, Southwest 250th, Northwest 8. Are those county roads?
There are pieces of them that are, let me see.
They're shared roads. They're
They're
pieces where
shared
the county
roads,
owns a
yeah.
segment and we own a segment. So instead of asking the county to come in and just chip seal their segment and have a chip seal dirt chip seal, we would guarantee that if you guys move forward, we'd be in for just under 600,000 to match your $1 million to make sure that residents aren't going from chip seal to dirt to chip seal.
And those ones that were deeded over to the city, you know, during the machinations however long ago. Okay.
Yeah, however they ended up in city ownership.
Yeah.
They were city ownership. So
Well, I would hope that we would do this. I would hope that we would continue with the chip seal program going forward. Where we ran astray is with this. I think it caused all the heartburn, or a lot of the heartburn with the chip seal was the special assessments and a lot of that was going out of the priority system. And I think, you know, I think we should have confidence in staff if they come back with a list of projects that would be good based upon, you know, their expertise. You know, I certainly wouldn't have a problem putting that in the budget this year. So, so if y'all want to make, y'all have any comments?
Well, we'll do our conversation after your motion.
Okay, so, Hutch,
You want to complete the, it's up to you. Okay,
okay,
that's
all
fine.
right.
All right, city commissioners, do you guys have any questions or comments for county staff? Commissioner Farnsworth?
I don't know whether you answer this or not, but what's the life duration of a chip seal versus a paved road?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, it's gonna depend on the use of that road, but you're definitely in probably a 15-year window. A true pavement, you know, like 20, State Road 26 out here, the state looks to get 20 years out of that. You're not gonna get that much out of a chip seal road. It depends on, you know, you have some farm roads that are handling some fairly heavy traffic a couple of times a year maybe, that might take more of a beating. We can try and address that during the design, but I would expect, you know, somewhere in the 15-year range is the top number.
And once a road is chip sealed, in order to pave it, do you have to start from the beginning, or can you pave over the chip seal?
It's gonna depend on the condition, but usually you can redress it during that 15-year period and keep the life of it going longer.
Well, if the county would rather pave the road instead of chip seal it, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. Thank you for that offer.
Any other, thank you, Commissioner Farnsworth. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Martin and then Commissioner Glanzer.
I think Commissioner Byerly made a few really good points about it, and I understand. I kind of trust the staffs to figure it out and come back with a good solution. I know your investment, I guess, is about 1.2. I know ours on this would be about half of that as a percentage of a budget. That gets me way out of my comfort zone as far as how much we would be putting in, but it's one of those things I got to just put in the bucket of the short-term pain, long-term gain. And I may be wrong, but I kind of feel like this is almost a product of what we pointed them in, what direction we pointed them in last year. To actually, to your point about 43rd Street, I mean, it's a good opportunity, obviously, to recycle some of that stuff so it doesn't end up in the landfill for sure. So I think those are all good takeaways, and I look forward to the finished product. But I think that checks a lot of my boxes for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin. Commissioner Glanzer.
I appreciate you considering this proposal, and I support it. And I heard what you said, that when you turn when the county takes over a state road, they make you improve it a lot more than just chip seal. So I think we're doing a good job not asking that much. And also I think it provides a good foundation for other municipalities, you know, in the future, because we should take care of our own roads. You know, the county should not be responsible for roads that are in our city only. So I think this is a compromise, and, you know, we all have the money issue in our head, but I think moving forward it's a good start. So thank you.
Commissioner Glanzer, would you please write that note to the city of Gainesville and send it to them? And we'd appreciate it.
You know, I think Commissioner Hutch hit this issue right on the head when he was asking whether or not this provides a model for you to take. And I want to applaud both of our staffs. I think that this has been a breath of fresh air working with you guys on this process. I think this is a model that you guys could take to other cities for cooperation. Our two boards obviously have our disagreements, but even in amongst those disagreements, we can come to the table and we can say these are the ideological principles that we believe in, and what's a mechanism, what's a formula that we can move forward on it. I think this gives you a way moving forward that you will can deed the transfer of the maintenance of that road forever and anon, so you can get it off your books. I know that everyone in the county is concerned about roads. I think if we have a mechanism by which we can make every entity responsible for its own roads and do it a good job, that allows you guys to then focus on your roads and your resources on those roads. So I think the repercussions of moving forward are all positive. I think that you guys can take this as a model to other cities, other municipalities, and you can use it to say this is what cooperation looks like. We appreciate working with you guys on Loft. I think that we've come up with a great compromise here. And again, this is an opportunity for us, for once and for all, on your timeline. So I would agree that this is a separate beast. This is a different conversation that you can have, because this is an opportunity for you to get rid of almost immediately 23 miles of road and put them onto our books on your timeline as you want to move forward. So all that I would ask, because $582,000 is a much more significant portion of our budget than $1 million is for yours, is that we don't do it all next year. So if we can dole that money out a little bit over the next 3 to 5 years, that would certainly help our budgetary concerns and making sure that we can meet our financial obligations, because you guys are in for 1.2, we're in for 6 on this, depending on how these guys finalize the numbers. But I agree with Commissioner Martin that I trust our staffs have been working magnificently together in a spirit of cooperation, and I think they'll come back with a great product.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
I'll move that the director, county manager, and attorney work with his counterparts in Newberry, drafting agreements with road commissions, including terms to transfer of county roads to municipalities for terms of specified improvements. Included in the analysis should be the California trigger the transfer, standards which shall be used for the improvements, and sources of funds.
Have a motion and a second. Commissioner Barley?
So, assuming that we were able to come to some kind of terms and reach an agreement, this would be in the form of an interlocal agreement, which is subject to change at any time by either commission.
Yes, sir.
So, a couple of folks change seats, they could decide it's not a good deal anymore. That causes me concern. We all have vested intentions, and one board can just honestly disagree with another one, and times can change. And looking ahead to the next discussion, and I have really tied this issue to the CRA discussion, justifiably, obviously, in my mind, and we're going to have that next. And the step with the CRA is permanent. The step with the roads is not. So that's another concern that I have. Either board could decide that it doesn't want to move forward with this, and if we do it, it's going to take many years to pull it off. So I'm concerned about that as well. I'm not there yet. I'm not supporting this deal yet. I can understand why the city of Newberry likes it. I'm not convinced yet that it's a good deal for the unincorporated area residents, but I'm going to wait and see those numbers that you bring back to us about how it would benefit unincorporated area taxpayers in the long haul. I'm really going to look at it for it to net out within the lifetimes of the people who are paying taxes today. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Any public discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Can you come up to the mic and introduce yourself, ma'am?
Good evening.
I'm Vicki Gaulnay, and I live on Southwest 226th Street, and I talked to you on the phone. I don't get it. We were here almost a year ago today. It was June, the first half of June, that we had the meeting. It's been a year. So now the coffers, there's another year of monies, right? What made me so frustrated is we've had dry weather now for what, a month, close to a month, probably no rain whatsoever. And that was always the contingency. We'll get to your road as soon as it dries out. We got to have some dry weather. So I was driving by on 26 coming home one day, and there was 202. The power wheel was going, and they were pressing that road. And I live on 226, 2 more miles west, and ours is just loose gravel. So I called the mayor and said, what is going on? There's 6 people that live on that stretch of mile, and there's 40 people that live on our stretch of mile. And they started ours, and now they haven't done anything. Well, anyway, the power wheel has now been sitting at the end at 15th and 226 for a week and a half, my husband said. Haven't done a thing. I saw a little bit of gravel being moved today, but they're probably working on it. But now here comes the rains. What are they waiting on? Christmas again? I mean, I called him in August, the road, Electric County Roads, Well, we gotta wait for dry weather. I called him in November, gotta wait for dry weather. We're in the rainy season now. So here we had this long stretch of dry, dusty weather. We thought, oh, yay, it's gonna finally happen. And I've lived out here since '94, and I've lived in the county since '76. So it's not like I haven't paid 30 years of taxes on my property. So I alone have paid probably $100,000 on my property over the years I've actually lived there since '94. So I just don't get all of this that's going on. My son was living in
Ma'am,
Union.
I hate to cut, but do you have a comment to the motion on the floor? Because that sounds like what you have is a comment about the time that it's taken to chip seal that road,
Well,
which isn't the motion on the
you're-
floor.
Well, you had something about cooperation, and we
So
worked
your
this out.
comment is in favor of cooperating together. Would I put you down on the record as, hey, two boards cooperate with each other?
Yeah, and one last comment.
Okay.
If you can learn from other counties, Union County, you go up there and everything is blacktopped. I mean, you go down a goat trail and it's blacktopped a mile into the woods. I don't know how they can do it, and we can't seem to get our things squared away. And you're saying, oh, well, I'll be with it in 3 to 5 years. Well, it's been another year since we've had this last discussion. So I just want to mention, it's very frustrating. You say, oh, well, we can wait. Maybe we won't do that. Maybe we will. Just do something. And you're talking about expenses. Well, you don't have the expense of maintenance if it's at least chip sealed.
Thank
if you
you,
get it
ma'am.
done.
We appreciate it.
Ms. Conley, I do, you know, and Ms. Mayor, you brought it up, so I'll give some explanation. And part of it is to defend Public Works, and part of the issue that took place over the summer, and that was Hurricane Irma hit, and Public Works was working their tail feathers off trying just to get the debris going, and it was all hands on deck just to do that, and that took. That probably took from whenever Irma hit till after the first of the year, and then quite candidly, they worked so hard and put in so many hours. They took some time off, and so.
Well, I talked to the guy on the steamroller, and he
Right.
just laughed at me and said, "Oh, we'll get to you. We'll get to you someday."
I'm telling you
That
I'm telling you what transpired. And the other thing, as far as Union County is concerned, Union County gets an awful lot of help from the state to pay for their roads because they're a fiscally constrained county. We don't get that. And the state takes responsibility for a good number of their roads. So that's
Well,
why they
I'm
get.
just saying, just like school boards, or anything, you can learn from others. Then
we
maybe
can't-
they have something.
We
to
can't learn
share.
from that because we don't get that funding source. We just flat out don't get it.
Yeah. Well, when
So-
they were here last year, they said it takes $154 to grade the road. I wasn't born yesterday. The guy that's been on the road grader for 3 hours on our road up and down for 3
Well,
hours,
I just
he
wanted
gets
to give you.
paid that much
I just
alone.
wanted to give you
So
that.
it's more than that.
explanation. So thank you very much. and
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Are there any other public comment on the motion on the floor for the county staff and the city staff to finalize the agreement that's been outlined here tonight?
I just have a few questions.
Don't forget to introduce
Deborah
yourself,
Campbell,
Ms.
please.
Davy.
On here you have Northwest 266th Street. It's right up there. Holder grade goes to 8th. 266th Street, is that a county road?
That part is the county and part is the city. That's one of the segments there that the city would be in to chip seal when the county executes
It's a
their
paved
reg-
road.
Right, part of it is paved, part of it is graded, and part of it is city, and part of
It is-
let our city manager speak to that.
266. That's just the limits. That's just Ms. Campbell. That's just the limits of it.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, 266th Street that Ms. Campbell's referring to is city-owned, city-maintained. It is the southern and eastern limit of the chip seal project that we're proposing, or that is being proposed for 8th Lane and Holder Grade.
Okay, that answer your question, Ms. Debbie?
Yes, but the road is awful. Okay, I've lost both my running boards on that road. Okay, Holder grade, to my knowledge, 8th Lane, Newberry Road, county maintains. They have maintained our road forever. The county used to maintain our road 20-something years ago. I have to say the city of Newberry does a hell of a better job. The county, I'm very disappointed in. It's all about money for y'all, and we all pay taxes here in Newberry. And you, sir, are just,
You want to address do you want to
Address
address
the
us, please?
I will address you, Mayor, because I have patience with you, because you're a wonderful man, and my commissioners
Well, we
are
all need
wonderful
patience.
people. County,
Appreciate
not
that.
so much. Okay? I hope you know what you're getting into and with this agreement, because I don't trust the county. That's my opinion, and I hope it works out. But the Hurricane Irma and the roads over there that were to be chip sealed and have been put away, Irma didn't do anything here. She didn't do any hurricane. I've been through Andrew. I've been through hurricanes. The storm we had here a couple months ago did more damage to our town than Irma did. Did it make the news? No. Did we have more damage? Yes. But did the county do anything? No. So I'm going to pray for y'all, and I'm going to hope that this goes well for us, because I don't trust the county. You don't fix your roads. We pay your taxes. We pay plenty of gas tax. We pay everything. And the reason you don't get the taxes on anymore is because the people in this town and county do not trust you, because you screwed us once before.
Talk to us, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Ms. Debbie. Thank you. Any other public comment to the motion on the floor?
Good day, commissioners and county commissioners. My name is Naeem Rached. I'm a citizen of Newberry. First off, thank you, Mayor Marlowe and city commissioners, and thank you, county commissioners, for spending the time to come out here. I run what's a closed forum called Newberry, Florida Politics, which is based off our local politics here. We keep it local, and sometimes county, you guys would be in there. It's not run by the city, by the way. It is, I am the admin.
Thank you for that.
That motion, huh?
Thank you for that disclaimer.
Oh, yeah.
Gets confusing sometimes.
So, my question seems to be, that's being posted on my forum constantly, is really the time frame. We keep hearing, we can't give you a time frame. We can't give you a time frame. This is starting to look more and more like a bad divorce, and people fighting over the children and who's going to fund what kid and who's giving child support, whatever the case. What is it going to take for our county and our city to sit down and say, you know, there's certain commissioners that have concerns. I understand that. I respect that. But have you guys actually sat down and said, this is what I want to see happen, so we can get this motion moving? Because the more we wait on this, the more complaints we're going to get, the worse the roads are going to end up being, the more complaints we're going to have from citizens. And they might not be your biggest voters to the county commissioners, but they're still voters. Every vote counts. So, in my opinion, as someone that studies politics, you do want them on your side. So, what is it going to take for us to work together so we can get this motion moving, so we can make everybody happy? I want to see the county happy. I want to see us happy as a city. And I do want to see our citizens happy as well by getting this done and getting this nightmare pretty much over with, this divorce done. Because that's what it's starting to look like. So, thank you.
Thank you, Naeem. And to answer somewhat Naeem's question, my prediction is that the county commissioners are going to go home tonight. They're going to think about this, and they're going to think, you know what, this provides a mechanism that we can get rid of these road mileage, which I've heard just about every one of the county commissioners make to different governing boards. And they're going to realize that this relationship right now has just created that model. So the upfront pain that Mr. Commissioner Martin mentioned, I think is going to pale in comparison to the long-term ability to be done with that road mileage. So, you know, I don't know what the timeline is. I think our timeline for our budgetary concerns needs to be in that 3 to 5 year frame, so that we can absorb those costs, which are much more impactful to our budget than they are to the counties. But just to be clear, you know, in the loft conversations, we are being paid now to maintain those mileage of roads. So we will continue to, if you guys say that you're not comfortable with this deal, we'll continue to maintain those roads, because that was the agreement. So we'll hold up our agreement. And one final point on that agreement, every time we have had a conversation about a county road that we maintain, we've always backed out our higher level of service. So what we've always and only ever asked the county to do is pay for the service level that you would provide, and we have always paid for that increased level of service. So we've never asked for you guys to pay for our service level. We've always asked for you to pay what your service level would be. We've always paid the increase, just to be clear on that point. Thank you for your comment, sir.
No, thank you.
Are there any other public comment on the motion on the floor? Sorry, I should have let the chair ask. This is y'all's motions.
That's okay. You're doing a great job, Jordan, so. I do have one question. How long will it take, because I know that we've tied this to the CRA, so when can both the CRA and this discussion take place at hopefully the same meeting?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, we're talking about 60 days in that time frame.
Okay. Well, want to give them enough time where we can both talk about it during our budget discussion, so, you know, sooner the better. So, thank you. So 2
Thank you.
months?
2 months, 60
So,
days.
To be clear, this motion is just to move it to the next stage of discussion.
Correct. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is unanimous. Okay.
See,
next-
we're so excited, we're jumping on board. Do I have a motion from our board? Would we like to mirror the county's motion?
I make a motion to mirror that.
I have a motion from Commissioner Glanzer to mirror the county's motion, and properly seconded by Commissioner Coleman. Any last public comment on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay.
Wonderful to work together.
Update on the CRA discussion, is that us or y'all?
Do we have the fire services first? Do we change our agenda around? My
Mine
agenda says,
Mine says update on community CRA. If y'all have something different, that's fine.
can we give you the update on the fire services since he's
Yeah,
right
that's
there?
fine.
Well, I don't know how we got two different agendas.
We are so flexible, that's fantastic.
Hey,
Go right ahead.
this spirit of cooperation is just amazing. We're working.
Good
Well,
evening.
thank you,
Good
Chief.
evening, Mayor, Sheriff Pinkinson, and Commissioners. My name's Ben Buckner. I'm Fire Chief, City of Newberry. I'll try to make this brief. This is going to be an update on the fire station expansion. Everybody's aware that that's been ongoing for quite some time. We're getting fairly close to wrapping that up. And Mr. Lucio will get the PowerPoint presentation up. Does everybody have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Okay.
Well, we're looking at two different agendas, so that might be asking
Yeah,
why. We're going to get that figured out. I think Mr. Dew just went out to make some copies, so we'll all be looking at the same thing. But
Okay.
as soon as it gets up, we'll go ahead and move forward.
The fire station expansion renovation, it basically, the first slide was the floor plan. The project specifications included 2,270 square feet of additional footage for the fire station expansion. Of that, 1,438 is conditioned space, 832 was for an ambulance bay. The total space provided was for an ambulance personnel, an office and storage space for ambulance personnel. The projected final completion date at this point is about 60 to 90 days. All expansion and renovation space is currently livable and being used. There were some photos. I'd really like for you folks to see the photos. Okay. We'll go through.
And you've
real
got the
quick.
clicker right there, Chief.
Okay, there's the floor plan. The red area is the area that was additional space. The green areas that are highlighted are renovated space. There are the numbers that I provided. There's a picture of the new ambulance bay, the exterior of that ambulance bay. Excuse me. The interior, those are the living quarters. The area on the left is the hallway looking towards some additional living space. The doors on the right-hand side of that hallway are all the living quarters that you see on the right-hand slide. That is a typical living quarter space for personnel. There's the new fitness room. The fitness room was actually used to be in a shed outside a metal building. We called it the hot box, as you can imagine. It's now been moved inside. That area where the fitness room is now located used to be a barrack style bunk room where we had Didn't matter if you're male, female, everybody slept in that same room, and that's how we did things. That office space you see there is the new EMS office, that, as you can see, is currently being used by our exchange program paramedic that we have with ACFR. New bathroom is a half a bath that's primarily going to be used for the general public. One of the things that we're trying to do with this renovation is our personnel that are there really didn't have a whole lot of privacy, and that's one of the things we fixed in this renovation was some privacy for our personnel. Our bathrooms, our existing bathrooms, were in that bunk room area, so if the public needed to come use the bathroom, they were back there in our personnel's personal space. So we've addressed that issue along with some gender items that we had issues with, male and female. The bathrooms are now very similar in size and capacity, so that was something we fixed. That's the interior of the ambulance bay, the slide on the right. As you can see, there's been a truck coming in and out of there. It has not been an ambulance. It is one of our brush trucks because we're currently some of the items that we removed from inside the station were in one of our existing bays.
But you were just testing to make sure it's the perfect fit for an ambulance
It
eventually.
fits real good.
So it's
Actually,
perfect spot.
We had one of the rescues pull in one day when they came over, and it fits real well. So
Almost like we designed it for that.
Gotta test it out.
It's amazing.
Gotta test it out. Okay, so that's the station expansion. The city has made a commitment to public safety, and by doing so, you know, I think they've addressed some of the gender equity issues that we've had. The city made a conscious effort, based on, in part, the fire services master plan, to plan ahead. And you know, one of my comments to our commission when this project started was, it's not if you build it, they're going to come. It's going to be need-based. I've said that all along. Fire service master plan has shown that need is there. And that's what I want to touch on next. This is and a lot of this stuff was in last year's presentation. Some of this stuff, you know, Chief Norcutt and his staff have provided to you guys at different points as well. Between 2010 and 2016, the city of Newberry has grown about 20%. That's a University of Florida statistic. Newberry is the third largest populated city in Lawrenceville County behind Gainesville and the city of Lawrenceville. Emergency calls for service are increasing within our initial response area. Excuse me. And I have a map of that initial response area here, and I'll show you that momentarily. So our call load is going up. Based on the current emergency responses that we have in this current year, we're looking at about a 10 to 12% increase in call load in our first response area compared to calendar year 2017. So calendar year 18, if everything stays the same, we're looking at about a 10 to 12% increase in call load. And this is one of the items and this is an older slide. This was from the March 2016 presentation by ACFR. Chief Norcutt actually showed me some stuff that he has that's newer than this. But if you look at some of the response times, and this is the rule average turnaround time from the time of dispatch till the time that ambulance becomes available. And if you look at FY 15, 98% of the time is an hour and 45 minutes. And that takes a unit off the road a lot of the time. 98% of the time they were back in service an hour and 45 minutes. 7% of the time an hour and 11 minutes. So the average is about 51 minutes based on that slide. All right, this is something that I know at least one county commissioner, after I showed this slide last year, when and this is also an ACFR, or this is not an ACFR slide, this is a slide out of the Fire Services Master Plan that was also used by ACFR for some of their presentations. If you look at the black asterisks that are on there, those are the additional proposed fire stations according to the Fire Service Master Plan. See if I can get this pointer to work. And there we
Is
we'll
there a
do it
difference
there.
between black and blue, Chief, up there that we need to be aware of? Or?
There is. If you see where
Okay.
and some of them kind of blend into the blue and the, like where Station 17 is, there's a blue asterisk in that area. It's actually Station 24 now because there's been numbering, realignment of numbers in the county. So Station 17, there's already currently an ambulance there. That is our closest ambulance to the city of Newberry. It's 9.3 miles away. They run a ton of calls. And something Chief Norcutt and I talked about either last week or it was last week or the week before. One of the things I'd like to see is how often we get that ambulance. Because it's not very often. It's not, I won't say it's the least, we don't get, we get them probably more than we get any other ambulance. But when you look at the percentage of calls, it's probably a smaller percentage of their calls than some of the other ambulances that we get. But as you can see where Station 28 is, which is Dewberry, there's a black asterisk there. That's called, that ambulance is called for in the Fire Services Master Plan. There's one call for at Station 29, which is in High Springs. And then where Station D is, that is a new station with ambulance and personnel and so forth. Station 20, this next slide here, Station 20, this is what's already happened in the Fire Services Master Plan as it pertains to ambulances. Rescue 20, which is the station between Alachua and High Springs at the dump. That station has stayed there. Rescue 25 was moved into the city of Hawthorne. That's actually now Rescue 62, I believe, is what it is. So Rescue 20 remained, the third arrow down, Rescue 20 remained at its current location about 2.8 miles from Station 29, and then Rescue 21, if you recall last year, that used to be old Rescue 2, that was moved into the city of Alachua. So between the city of Alachua and the city of High Springs, there's two rescue groups. The closest one to High Springs being the Rescue 20, which is about 2.8 miles. This is out of the Fire Services Master Plan. This is one of the pages. If you look at the 3 items that have already been completed, the remaining 3 items are an ambulance in Newberry, an ambulance in Micanopy, and one new Station D. Over to the right-hand side of that note, Rescue 21 is staffed 24 hours a day in Station 21. So they share housing with Engine 21 in Alachua. Since this Fire Services Master Plan was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners, there's been 5 critical care peak load units placed on the road. I think everybody's belief was that this was going to help alleviate some of the lagging response times. And I know Chief Norcutt, and I believe it was March, it may have been February, I think he relayed to the county commission that that's not necessarily happening. So if you look down at the proposal from the folks that did the Fire Services Master Plan, if the implementation of those rescue units and the movement of those rescue units is implemented in accordance with the Fire Services Master Plan, those are the expected response times, the percentage of expected response time. So the Rule 12 minute, with that implementation model, 99% of the calls running the rural areas ought to be able to be implemented 99% of the time within 12 minutes. The urban cluster, which if you look at the definitions within the master plan, the 6-minute, which Chief Norcutt, if you will, correct me if I'm wrong, but the municipalities that are not the city of Gainesville we're looking at them as urban clusters. So with that implementation, 84.2% of the time, we should be able to have from dispatch to an on-scene time of 6 minutes. So that's significantly different than where we're at today. Okay, next slide. Okay, the ambulance deployment cost. This is something that I know our commission is interested in seeing, and it's something that I think everybody needs to kind of wrap their head around so everybody can see some of the numbers that were presented to me by ACFR staff. Initial startup of cost for an ambulance about $300,000. $425,000 annual operating cost for a peak load ambulance. Now those units are not on the road 24 hours a day, and that's, you got 5 peak load units currently. $600,000 annual operating cost for a 24-hour ambulance that is housed in a fire station with other apparatus, and about $625,000 annual operating cost for a 24-hour ambulance that is a standalone, for instance, Rescue 20 in Alachua. And in conversations with Chief Northcutt, those numbers, you know, they're approximates, and they're not, you know, etched in stone. But you know, if you look at a cost differential between the 425 and the 600, that's your personnel cost of 125,000. That's just personnel cost to go from a 24-hour truck, or from a peak load truck to a 24-hour truck. And there's a cost associated with operating the station, and that would be a cost if the county implements the fire services master plan in accordance with the master plan. Newberry obviously has planned ahead for that to happen, and we'd love for that to happen.
What's Newberry skin in that game?
We
Chief?
think that cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000. That's what we think. And the reason we say that, if you're, you know, if you had to, where that number comes from, you have station supplies, you have cleaning supplies, you have truck washing supplies, you have utility bills. Then if you had to build a station, as you did in Alachua, and just say it's $1 million, and you amortize that out over 30 years at 1.25 or 1.5%, that gets you close to that $75,000. But that's where, you know, we're close. We can house an ambulance tomorrow if the county commission decides that's where the ACFR decides that's the best place to put it. Newberry's
Chief, can I interrupt you just one second? Do you know of any other municipality that has taken on the burden of renovating and the cost for the facility in anticipation of the county implementing their master plan? Or is Newberry unique in trying to look ahead and have skin in the game?
I can answer that one.
Not that I'm aware of. High Springs did have a renovation a few years back, 3 years or so. But they did not include additional space for the ambulance. I can't speak to if they can house additional personnel, but I know there's no additional space for the housing of an ambulance.
Is that your answer, Mr. Chair? Thank you.
But other than that, I'm not aware of any other municipalities that have done that in anticipation of implementation of the fire services master plan.
Yes.
I would like to, Chief Northcutt, if you will, he has the updated response times, and our response times, by my numbers that we use on our reports, are not CAD numbers. They are, you know, they don't come from CAD. They do come from CAD, but they're in our report system, not the CAD system. I had us with about a 30 to 40 second increase in response time from the last time we did the numbers to now, and Chief Northcutt actually has the CAD numbers.
Chief Northcutt.
Mr. Chair, Bill Northcutt, Chief of your Fire Rescue. That is correct. For fiscal year 16 and 17 are the 2 years that I have for rescue response times to Station 28's territory. And at 80% of the time, we were in 2016, at 17 and a half minutes. And in FY 17, that is up to 17 minutes and 53 seconds. So almost 18 minutes, about a half minute increase in that 1 year period. So, and as Chief Buckner has indicated, you know, this area is certainly an area that's geographically a large area that I do not have the information at this point, though, exactly which rescues are responding into this area. That's information we haven't been able to put together yet.
Commissioner Cornell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief Northcutt. Chief Buckner, I want to thank you too. You know, we rely on Newberry in the unincorporated area, and your fire department is, you know, spot on. I know we've got a great working relationship between the two departments, so I do want to thank you, and obviously the commission. I guess what this is coming down to, and I want to ask the chief if this is correct, is we are anticipating, getting our budget from the manager, and really the decision point is another peak unit or a 24-hour, unit. I know you have, for the last 2 years, recommended a 24-hour unit, and I know y'all have a little dispute here about what we can afford and what's needed. Before I hear from the manager, do you agree with that? Is this really $175,000 difference? Do you agree with those numbers, 425 versus 600?
Yes, the numbers that Chief Buckner used are the numbers we use on our budget requests.
Okay, and so, and Chief Buckner, you said there is room in the fire station for another, as far as sleeping arrangements and...
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, that's great. So, I guess it comes down to, Madam Manager, I'm not asking you to say you've already decided yet, I know you're working on the budget, but, if we were to put in another 24-hour unit, if we make that commitment, which I know we've asked you, is Newberry the place, or is Station D? What would the master plan call for based on the call loads?
We've already discussed this. If a 24-hour unit were to go into place, Newberry would be the logical place to put that 24-hour unit.
Makes sense to me, because Jonesville's the nearest one. I mean, to your point.
So there is a budget request from fire for both a peak load and a 24-hour unit. From a budgetary standpoint, I can tell you that the manager is myself. I'm not talking about myself in the third person. Myself is only recommending funding one of those based on balancing the budget that I will be presenting, and the one that I am recommending is the peak load, because in my discussions with fire, the peak load is the one that we need most at this time if they had to make a choice between them. The peak load unit will relieve 17 and the ones coming out of Archer and some of the other locations, that will free up those to be able to have more time in the city, as well as some of the other. Now, if the board chooses, of course, to go with a 24-hour unit instead of a peak load, or with both, then we'll have to work with those numbers.
Could you say a different way? A 24-hour unit in Newberry would free up 17?
I think there's some issues with peak load as well that we need to address.
Yes, certainly a unit out here would cut down on those response times for rescues and would free up, shorten response times, especially when 17 is out, and either 20, the one in High Springs, is having to come down, or even those from further in town. So
yeah, 15 over there by
that's correct. Yeah, so really would help protect this area and the Archer area.
Okay, and from just a dollar perspective, though, $175,000. That's the difference. Okay, thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, could I ask the same question of you, Chief Northcote? Which one have you budgeted for? Peak load or the 24-hour?
Mr. Chair, I don't do the budget. All I do is ask.
Which one have you asked for?
I have asked for both. I've asked for both, and the manager is correct when we're asked, in that which. If we only have the money for the peak load unit, we need the peak load unit. If there is money available for a 24-hour unit, with a 24-hour unit would help us also address those calls after midnight and 7 days a week. Peak load units are on 6 days a week. So again, it comes down to a budgetary issue and our needs. The peak load unit will help fill a lot of that in-town call load increase.
And that 175 differential between the two doesn't take into account Newberry's 75 that would be offsetting that cost, because we would be covering the cost of the facilities.
The cost that you see if we were to put, again, the peak load unit doesn't have any facility expenses, and if we were to put another unit in, we do have fire stations that could house it. There was not any plan. I didn't submit a plan or request to build any infrastructure for any
because we've done it for
any new stations. In this area, it's been offered for several years. Okay. 600 is a fixed. That is a staff cost and an operating fleet replacement, fuel, that type thing. The 300 is a fixed cost for all the capital expenses for the rescue up front. So yes, we did not budget for, and as Chief Buckner submitted about $25,000 in. That's just the monthly expenses for electric and that type thing. None of that included, nor did we request any capital facility.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Well, when you say peak load, what is the times you're talking about?
Our peak load units work between 13 and 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's what that $400,000, $425,000 a year funds. We actually look at our call load based on time of day and day of the week. How many calls are we experiencing? And we have one of those units that goes on at 6 a.m., one goes on at 8, one at 10, one at noon, and one at 2 to give us the coverage.
The area?
It, pardon me?
It varies on the area?
Not those units are pretty much staffed in town, but those units stay so busy and committed to incidents, they rarely make it back to a home base. So they basically they shift around a little bit, may hang, certainly the east side of Gainesville is a high call load area. The student area off of Southwest 24th Avenue is a very high call load area, so they can move into those jurisdictions.
I know that riding in the back of an ambulance is a very expensive thing to do. Does those expenses cover your cost, or?
They do, Mr. Chair, they do not. We, you may remember over the last 3 years, we have added the peak load division. That really was a new concept for us in our desire to address the call load demand that we were experiencing. All of those units we put on the road with anticipated additional revenue. So what the manager is proposing this year is actually additional public subsidy. We generate about $12 million a year for a $13 million operation. We bill about $16 million a year, but as you can imagine, once you start doing Medicare and Medicaid, once you can bill $1,000 if you want to. They will allow you $400, and you can't charge any more than that. So we have about $3 million a year in Medicare and Medicaid write down. And then there's other, like any other business, and 911 services, a lot of bad debt. So we generate, again, it's about $12 million out of a $13 million operation.
Commissioner Martin?
I kind of got lost in the numbers of what stations where and who's doing what and who's on first, but Chief Buckner, if you could satisfy my curiosity. Obviously, we've invested a lot of money in the ambulance in anticipation of getting an ambulance. It's within the county's master plan to add an ambulance soon. It sounds like the data supports putting it over here. Am I good so far?
You're good.
Okay. Then, I mean, I know we did have an ambulance south of town that kind of covered Newberry and Archer at one point. So hopefully we're getting back to that point. And I would my only comment to the county, in the numbers, is there a factor for the ebb and flow of what's theoretically kind of our population when we have county bed tax generating events out here at Champions Park and the archery center and all those different things that we're having out there? Does that really count in a population number somewhere, or is it reflected in the calls, or is that considered at all, because it swings significantly?
I can't speak to the county side whether or not it's calculated or not. We do, during some events, we do see an increased call load.
Okay.
Gatorback. We see an increased call load. Occasionally at Champions Park, we see an increase, especially during their week-long events. We see increased call loads. Nothing off the chart significant, but you do notice some additional calls to those areas.
Our football games, especially when we play Bronx.
Football games,
well,
occasionally.
I mean, I guess as long as we've done our part, then I guess the chips kind of fall where they may. Again, if we look at the data, hopefully that sells it to put it out here to get coverage, and not only for us, but I know there's a lot more people out here than us.
One thing I would like to comment on again, I briefly touched on it. We now have 5 CC trucks on the road that we did not have before, and as Chief Northcutt alluded to in the new data, our call load in the rural area has gone down slightly, but in the urban cluster, our response time, not call load, our response times have gone up. So we've got 5 CC trucks on the road, and our response times in the urban cluster has not gone down. And that's something, myself included, thought was probably gonna happen when these CC trucks came on the road. It was gonna free up the Rescue 17s, it was gonna free up the Rescue 21s and 20s that are our closest units. And that just hasn't transpired to date, not to the point that we thought it was gonna be.
Commissioner Chair. Commissioner Hudson.
So I've got a couple of questions.
Mr. Chair, in this case, it's not, this was not turnaround time we talked, that I shared. That was the table that Chief Buckner shared, but what I shared, that was just the response time from the time the unit went responding to the time they actually arrived on scene, and that's just the rescue coming to this territory. It's running about the same at the Shands has been doing a bit better. They've changed their nurse manager in the ER, and she's really doing a good job on getting the turnarounds. We still have times that we can sit on the wall there for an hour, and it really just depends on. But they are doing a much better job. We haven't had the opportunity lately to run those statistics again. And it's my understanding. Hopefully, the manager has indicated that we should be able to start addressing that more readily next year. Generally, without having actually looked at the data to how long of a period they have between calls, I would venture to guess as I'm standing here that the 30 minutes it would take to get here, they wouldn't make it here before they were dispatched to another call. We looked at unit utilization just recently, and our regular rescues are committed to incidents about 35% of their available time during the day. And the peak load units are over 50% of the time that they are available during the day. Those units stay very busy by design, so I don't believe that would help us. A 24-hour unit, and this gets into Commissioner Martin's comments about the responses and the numbers, especially as it relates to both response times and numbers of calls. We have to factor in a lot of different things when we look at all those different numbers, because if you look at actual numbers of responses, Newberry is not the place to put it, because this area, it is the downtown Gainesville, as you can imagine, where the students are on the east side of Gainesville and so forth, that really drives a lot of the response numbers. But then there's the balance. You have to look at what is the response time for that unit, and how fast are we getting these patients then to the hospital where they can get that, while they certainly get an advanced care once we arrive on scene, even with engine or Quint 28, because we do have our medic on that unit, but once they start being transported. So there is a balance, and that's why I'm suggesting it's time to get one in Newberry. We also have the areas around Archer and south of High Springs that are sparsely protected, and at least with a transport. So I think that's where the balance would come in, and I would recommend, especially with the facility here, that this is where we would place the next time we get a 24-hour unit. Yeah, and we have not, I don't know if Chief Buckner's looked at that, we have not looked at have not had the opportunity to look at the day of the week and time of day that the responses are in this territory. So I can't answer that question.
So I think Sunday is a big rattlesnake handling day in this area. So, Commissioner Byerly.
So you just kind of introduced a concept I hadn't heard before, balance. So I want to make sure I understand what that means. You know, the ambulance is general fund. Everyone in the county pays to it.
Correct.
And I guess I've always kind of thought about this as we ought to be deploying the resources in a way that's going to result in the most lives being saved. You could take every single ambulance and put them in the small towns and put none in Gainesville, and that would result in the most Alachua County lives being saved. That's what we do. If you could put every single one of those ambulances at the intersection of University Avenue and 13th Street and it would save the most lives in Alachua County, that's what we do. That makes sense to me. And then it becomes a math problem. Complicated one, but a math problem. And that's fair. When you introduce a term like balance, then we're talking politics and jurisdictional boundaries, and I'm not sure I understand it. So let me ask the question this way. Are the way we're deploying our resources now, is it resulting in the greatest safety for our citizens in terms of lives saved and complications and injuries avoided? And if we wanted to maximize the additional lives saved and injuries avoided by the placement of another unit, are we confident in the work that currently exists in front of us in the form of the master plan?
Mr. Chair, I'm confident that the deployment of the current resources are appropriate with the highest concentration, all of the peak load units, all 5 of those units, as well as about 9 of the other units that we have are within the former urban Gainesville Urban Reserve. Certainly the highest concentration of people, the highest concentration of responses. My reference to a balance, there comes a period where the length of response times for the rural residents has a balance. While that may be a fewer number of people, those minutes are critical. And as those minutes start to get lengthened, it becomes a critical aspect for those rural residents. As with the unit that is in Orange Heights, it is isolated, has been out there for many years in a very rural section of the county. That particular unit is has those very long turnaround and response times, protects and much fewer responses. And so that's why my reference is to the balance of those. If we put all of those, theoretically, every unit we have within the city urban reserve area and had advanced life support fire engines out in all of the stations, we would have a well-protected community most of the time. But I will also argue that by the standard, just simply response time, from the time we pick a patient up and start en route to the hospital, if that is being delayed by the 15 minutes it takes to get out here to the patient, that's 15 minutes that is an adverse impact to that patient. Of course. Now, granted, it is not the high numbers. So my reference to balance is as a fire rescue professional. It is not a balance to a numbers guy. It's not a balance to the I want to throw the O&B folks under the bus here, but to the folks that are counting the numbers, counting the money. But as a service provider, when a unit, let's say that Rescue 28, if and when we get one, is that 17 or that the Jonesville station is busy, it's going to take this unit longer to get there than it would have that rescue. But we have to remember that this is one of the furthest locations from the hospitals. And so again, that was my reference to balance. It's certainly a personal measure in where would you put it. An argument can be made to simply put it at Station 33 downtown, or there on 441.
What I'm trying to understand is the argument I would make is that we should put it where it's going to save the most lives. Everyone in the county pays into the general fund.
Well, then, Mr. Chair, we've got 3 or 4 we need to move into Gainesville. If we're looking at only the numbers of responses, we have other rural rescues that I would suggest, and this actually gets into When we, several years ago, were threatened at the state with a tax on our COPCN, that's the Certificate of Need of Public Convenience and Necessity. That is for people to be able to operate transport. There was an attack on that, and one of the challenges that the senator gave to me was, you're making this all about money, aren't you? Well, we aren't, because we have to have the money to provide the services in the rural areas. We have to provide the services, we believe, an effective service in the rural areas. We have to have that revenue, because the threat was City of Gainesville could simply say, I want to provide my ambulance transport in the city, and under the changes they were proposing, they could have done that. And I've run the numbers, but for what we generate out of the city, they could put 7 rescues on it and pay for all of it, and we would be strapped to provide any services in the rural areas. So, you know, I don't balance just the numbers. I don't balance just the responses, because our rescues, as we showed, as Chief Buckner showed, that 51-minute turnaround time for a rescue, that is available at the hospital. They have still got to get back out to the territory they are assigned to. So in theory, a rescue from here, if its available time is an hour and a half, it's still got 30 to 45 minutes to get back out here if they don't get caught on another call in what we always refer to in the vortex, which is that high call load area there in town. And we can have units that get tied up in there for actually hours. They may not get back to station sometimes 10 o'clock at night.
Okay, just 18 years in now, and this is the first time I've ever heard this issue characterized this way, and it's I'm going to have to think about what this means. 'Cause
Well,
that's a hard call when we're knowingly allowing more people to die in the interest of balance. I don't really understand.
I don't think you're
May
knowing
not
we
be
let people die. I think that's a mischaracterization.
I'm not saying
It's-
that.
Hang on, guys. Hang on.
I'm sorry.
Hang on.
I thought I asked a pretty straightforward question.
And I can't tell you how many people are dying in this community, as I'm saying right. We have ALS engines all over the place. We do a good job of life saves, and it's not because that rescue got on scene, it's because that engine got on scene.
Okay, I'm not going to back off this question because it's important. So I want to make sure that it's understood. I'm asking if our current deployment of funding that we have for ambulance service is deployed in a way that ensures that the most number of people who pay into the system, their lives are saved and injuries are avoided, the things that ambulances do for them. Because that's how we rationally allocate resources usually, to do the most good, the greatest good for the greatest number. That's how we do government. And I didn't have an answer. I'm relying on your answer. You told me if that was the metric, we'd be moving some things around. You did answer that, so I'm not mischaracterizing anything. I'm responding to your answer, and I don't know what I think at this point. I'm just acknowledging I need to do some thinking about this, because I thought that's what we were doing. And I thought our fire services master plan deployed taxpayer resources in a way that would do the greatest good for the greatest number.
But you still have people out in the outlying areas, Mike.
I'm well aware of that. I'm one of them. I can hit the Marion County line with a rock from my house, so I understand.
So, I mean, you
do.
still have a responsibility. I mean, we are
Yes, we do.
responsible for that.
Yes,
so.
we do.
Mr. Mayor?
Dr. Hirschman?
Yeah, so I'm going to address a couple of things. Commissioner Byerly, if you're talking about people that are paying into the system, you're offering service to everybody in the county. Not everybody pays into the system, because that system is funded by property tax, correct?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
So
and
not
that mean- and
everybody-
that means, no, that means everyone pays.
No,
correct?
not everybody is a property owner, so not everybody is paying into tax.
Everyone
More-
pays property taxes either themselves
No.
or to their landlord.
Yes.
Order,
Sorry,
please.
that's-
Guys,
Students do not pay property tax.
Yes, they do.
I have a student.
guys.
All right, wait.
Guys, yeah, we'll both,
All right.
we're going to have a conversation up here, and then we'll open it up to public comment, and everybody will get a chance to make a comment. But we're going to do this in an orderly manner. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the coordinated gavel bang. I think Dr. Ursum has the floor.
He asked me a question, though, in fairness. I
And
answered
you-
his question.
All right.
So I wasn't
Okay,
interrupted.
Mike. Dr. Hirschman, you have the floor.
We can have back and forth. I don't mind. Oftentimes, the accidents that do occur out here in Newberry aren't rural activity associated. Commissioner Hutchinson, don't characterize us that way. You know better. My personal emergency, I might be the only one up here on the dais that's actually performed CPR to save a life. I'll stand corrected outside of our law enforcement issue. That change in 23 seconds
When you're doing CPR to save a person's life, 23 seconds is a long time. When you're waiting for that ambulance to transport somebody to the hospital, the nearest hospital, is a long time to save that person's life. They weren't playing with a rattlesnake. They weren't riding their ATV. They were just sleeping in bed that night. Emergencies don't happen on an administratively defined peak load time. They happen when they happen. And I think, given the population expansion in Newberry, we deserve 24-hour ambulance. We've set up the system and committed the resources to house that ambulance. And absolutely right, the funding does not always pay for it all the way, but a lot of us, we pay for our ambulance rides, and certainly I footed the full bill for that ambulance ride for that woman I saved. She happened to be my wife. And so when we're talking about balance, I appreciate Chief's discussion of balance, and I'm not sure how it's an incomprehensible concept to get between absolute call numbers and a responsibility to the life, limb, and safety of Alachua County voters on the western half of the county. And neglecting that and saying, I've got to think about this more after we've been working at this, and I'm new, but it's been working at this for how long, to say I've got to think about this more, I think is unfortunate at best.
Okay, Commissioner Cornell, then Commissioner Glanzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is more for both the chiefs. This is my third year on the commission, and what I remember in my fourth meeting here, the first meeting was we didn't have peak load units, we didn't have ambulances. You know, our response times were really, really high, and I think we have taken some steps, but public safety has to be our number one priority. I mean, it has to. You know, what is the cost of saving a life? I think everyone up here feels that way. I don't think I'm unique to make that statement. A couple other things happened though. Shands put a station, an emergency room, at 39th and Spring Hill and at Archer Road and Tower Road, and North Florida put one at 43rd and 53rd, and they put a full service emergency room on Newberry Road and Parker Road. And my question is, and maybe you don't have this data, but how has that changed the turnaround times and the availability of the additional peak loads that we've put into the system, largely in the urban core, but also, you know, the idea when we talked to Shands in North Florida was when someone in Newberry needs to get to a hospital, instead of having to get all the way over to the university, we have a full emergency room right there on Parker Road and University. Has that changed the response times? Do we have that data yet? Have they been open long enough where we can respond to that question?
Mr. Chair, we do not transport to those remote ERs. Those, especially the North Florida ones, we actually transfer patients from those remote ERs to their main ER when they need it. So that was part of how we added 2 of the peak load units, is that the revenue generated from those transfers covered the cost of those 2 peak load units.
So we don't transfer to there?
We do not.
And why not?
Well, in many cases, the patients are going to need to be then transferred up to the main facility, and they have to have a unit to do that. So we would, in essence, be committing 2 different trucks at 2 different times to do that. North Florida also is concerned because they pay us for the one from the remote ER to the main ER, not the patient.
So that hasn't helped our turnaround times at all?
It is not. We are still working on identifying those opportunities when we have units on the wall. Is it time to divert to those remote ERs so that we can get our trucks back in service? But we have not been able to complete that shift.
Okay, what is, okay, thank you for that. I wasn't aware of that. On the cost, the $600,000 for the 24-hour unit out here, what would be the net cost? What would be the net cost?
In looking at the, it would really be global, and in this particular case, this is the first time since 2005 that the manager would be proposing any additional transports without additional revenue. So in essence, it will be an increased public subsidy completely. That there's not the patients being transported now are already paying into the system, so that by putting these trucks on, it's not additional revenue to be able to calculate additional revenue covering part of the cost. We did that for all 5 peak load units, but we don't have the last 2 were because of the North Florida transfers. They've solely paid for those last 2.
Okay, and your request is for both the 24-hour unit, which would be here, and the peak load, and the manager is making the discussion, but that's your request.
That has been our request, and as you heard her say, that budgetarily she can only do the peak load unit.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Glanzer.
Thank you. My comment's very brief, and I'm almost as new as Commissioner Hersom, and I don't want to diminish the complexity of the issue. But if I was a citizen here, I would be asking a few questions. If there's a county plan to get a new ambulance, and no other municipality has, built any place for it, not even Gainesville or the county, and we did build one, we have built, and it's ready to go, and why wouldn't we put it there? Why wouldn't you put it there? So I'm just making that statement. I'm not asking you to say yes or no, but it just seems so, it just hasn't been answered for me. Why wouldn't we put it there? Where would you put it if not here? Can I ask that question? What is the option?
One thing about your question, Commissioner, is that's the fire services master plan. That is the page of the fire services master plan that was completed and I believe approved in 2013 by the Board of County Commissioners. That was the deployment model for the rescue. And one thing you don't see on there is the peak load units or the critical care trucks, as they're often called. But that was a policy/operational decision that the county decided to make before they really decided that they were going to, hey, we're going to implement the fire services master plan. But back to one of the other questions is, when we talk about response times and things of that nature, and as Chief Northcutt just mentioned, when the county doesn't transport to the standalone ERs, if you will, what ends up happening a lot of times is the Rescue 24s, which is one of the closest units to the new standalone ER at Parker Road, they get hammered with transfers out of that facility. Remember which unit I said was our closest unit? 24 out of Jonesville. So there's, and again, I appreciate the balance comment too, Chief, because that's something that, as he and I look at things, it's different than the bean counters and what policy makers look at sometimes. We all have to be considerate of those things, and those have to be taken into consideration whenever decisions are being made. At the end of the day, whenever it comes to saving lives, that's what we're charged with in our communities, and that's what we do. That's why Chief Northcutt's asking for the 24 and the peak load. So.
Madam Manager, would you like to get in here?
Mr. Chair, if I could simply clarify, my comment was not that we could only afford a peak load unit. My comment was that my recommendation is that we can afford one, either the 24-hour or the peak load. Which one I'm recommending in the budget is based on the advice from Alachua County Fire Rescue as to which unit would be more critical to the system at this point in time. My understanding that is that that's the peak load. And of course, if the board wants to make a budget decision that includes both of those, or to disagree with the determination that the peak load is the most critical to the system and go straight to the 24-hour unit if you want to go to one, that's a policy decision for you all to make. Or if you want to go to two, then we'll have to look at what we're going to shuffle around in the budget. But my recommended budget will have one, and that one is based on my discussions with the Alachua County Fire Rescue, and that would be the peak load unit.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Farnsworth.
Yes, I was wondering, does the Gainesville Fire Department, do they provide ACLS services whenever they respond to a call?
Mr. Chair, yes. Most all of the fire apparatus you see throughout the county is advanced life support. The few that are not are High Springs, and La Crosse and Micanopy.
And
The oth-
Newberry does.
Newberry is, we have an employee exchange program we've had in place for many years that has one of our paramedics on this unit.
And what is the response time for the ambulance in the city of Gainesville versus Newberry?
City of Gainesville is under 10 minutes. Again, I don't have those right here. They've been, from the response time, it's
I think
actually.
we're 18.
So the citizens of Gainesville are getting serviced adequately, they're under 10 minutes.
Much higher than here.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could address the comment about whether or not other organizations have provided facility. We've been in Station 3 in the city for over 30 years. So yes, we've been in other departments' buildings for a long time,
I think that his point was recently.
Yeah, recently just Hawthorne. Hawthorne transferred the ownership of that station to us. We renovated it, and we have a rescue in that station as well.
Right, but we've renovated it. So, Commissioner Barley?
Thank you. So, Commissioner Hurston, you asked an important question, I think, and I want to make sure everyone leaves here with an understanding of the answer. Because I've heard this a lot during the time I've been a county commissioner. I frequently hear complaints that people who are renters or are students aren't really paying full freight. They don't pay property taxes, and so the extension is somehow they're not entitled to the same level of services as everyone else. My other job is I'm a landlord. I own rental properties, and I assure you, and any landlord here can do so, tenants pay property taxes. I don't pay them. It's a straight pass-through. They pay the same property taxes. In fact, because of Save Our Homes, which provides benefits to people who are homeowners, renters pay more. They pay more than you. They pay more than me on a value basis. If anything, they're entitled to a higher level of service. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind when we're making decisions about how to allocate services. It's not fair to think that students or renters somehow are entitled to less. In fact, if you use that logic, they're entitled to more. And by the way, I never stop reassessing or rethinking issues in the light of new information, and I bet you're the same way. Something new comes up that you haven't thought about before, new facts, a new perspective. I think we have a job to reassess, to always try to make better decisions, and that's all I'm doing. I know it's not popular for me to say these things here tonight, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Okay, Commissioner Hudson.
Not very clear about my comments. I was a volunteer firefighter in Windsor for almost a decade. When the burning houses by myself, I know what the risks are. Living in rural areas. I also know that based on my experience in rural areas, that they're prone really to higher or more accidents and that kind of investment. So it seems to me that the problem is looking at some of the other information that would enable us to position an ambulance here that may be more sensitive based on
Okay, any further comments?
The comments from our board.
I would say as we go through the budget process, you said that these are just going to be solely paid for by the general fund. Is that correct? Well, I think something to consider as we go through this deliberation would be that the fact that the urban core has benefited to, it sounds like, to the tune of 5 critical care units in the last, 4 years? You know, that perhaps some consideration should be made to it for a 24-hour to benefit the outlying areas, because you know, it's 5 to 1, and so not saying that that's where we'll make the ultimate decision, but I think that should be a consideration going forward.
And I'll just say, Mr. Chair, just to my colleagues, county commissioners, that I'm going to be supportive of both. So.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Cornell. And my final comment before we move on to the next would be, just simply reiterate that the county's stated goal of response time is 6 minutes, and Newberry's looking at 18. It's 3 times the response rate of other places in the county. So I would rephrase the question that's been asked up here to simply say, how do you ask someone in Newberry, in the rural areas, to pay the same tax rate and not receive the same level of service? I have tried really hard, and I understand that comment. He said it was impossible, but I think we can do better than 18. We have tried, I think, in the city of Newberry to never come with just our handout. We've always tried to come to you with something in the game. So if there's something else that we can do to show our commitment to public safety of our residents, to decreasing that 18 minutes down to something that's more in line with what other residents in this county receive, please communicate that to your staff. They can communicate to our staff. You know, at this point, I think we've done everything that we can think of to do that's in our power to do to push this issue forward, again, along your stated goal of your master plan. So we're doing our part. If there's something else, please let us know. And that will be my final. Did our board have anything else to say?
So, want to move on to the next item?
Public comment on
Public
this
comment?
before we
Yeah.
move on?
Yes.
Okay, I saw Miss Debbie's hand first. You can start the line. And Miss Debbie, don't forget to introduce yourself again, just for the record.
Deborah Campbell. 2 years ago, unfortunately, my grandson drowned in my pool. Okay? I know CPR, and I did revive him. But did I have anybody show up over 30 minutes? No, sir, I didn't. I had 5 Alachua County Sheriff's Office in my driveway. 5. No paramedics. Do you know what it's like to give your 3-year-old grandson CPR when he's blue? No, you don't. You don't ever want to know it. Okay? Yeah, we have rattlesnakes, but I've seen one and I've lived here 20 years. Okay? I live 2 miles down a dirt road. It's not fun. He knows it. I know it. And other people know it. We deserve the same rights as the other citizens in this county. And we have the facilities that we paid for, not y'all, we paid for, to house the wonderful people that serve. My father was a fireman. They didn't have paramedics back then. He worked on everybody, every car accident. I do the same. I will stop and I will save your life if I can, even though I may get sued in this day and age. But we deserve the same rights. There are children here. When I moved here 20 years ago, we didn't have Newtown. We had a little country way. We didn't have Newberry Oaks. We have more developments here. We are the fastest growing city. And we don't need to be ignored. We're a great city. We come together, we love each other, and we stand by each other. And that's what we do here in Newberry. And I just hope you never, ever have to do what I did that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Debbie.
This is Vicki Gaulnay. Concerning that everybody pays for the same level of service, I was just assessed that special fire assessment. It's really not on your property taxes, but it is. It's a special $425 a year. So don't say we all pay the same. I'm assessed, and I'm only 5 minutes down the road here, but I'm outside of Newberry, I guess, is the problem. And also, my husband, we were going to call 911 about a month ago. He says, either take me or call 911. Well, it turned out it was a kidney stone, and he thought it probably was. So we went down to Parker Road. But now, if we had called 911, they would have serviced him. He was there just over an hour for $23,500. But that ambulance call would have been recorded, and if they had to transport him again, you'd get another call. Your numbers would look better if you utilize those satellite places. And sometimes it is just something that, you know, they gave him some pain meds and a couple prescriptions and they sent him home. So sometimes it isn't, you know, this, that, or the other that's life-threatening. It's something, he was in a lot of pain. So think about using those satellites. That's what they're for. And the last comment is, I don't know, I still see a lot of other county ambulances up and down Newberry Road coming in from the outer areas. Long ago, it's been 10 or 15 years now, Shands was going to build a hospital behind Walmart there in Levy County in Chiefland. I don't know what's become of that, but I don't know whether the ambulances are tied up in the emergency room because of all these other ones coming in. If that's tying up your time, does anybody address that? Has anybody gotten with Shands and said, are you going to build a place for the outer line areas, cause you talk about time, there's a lot of time there, but then that's those counties bringing theirs in by ambulance. But those are kind of food for thought to consider. And don't say, and as far as your rental, you're passing on through their rent. They're paying rent. You're paying the taxes on your property.
Speaking
So
of
don't
rent.
use that. So, okay, just, he's a commissioner too. I can address to him too.
I don't mind at all.
Well, anyway, that's the points I was gonna make. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Gomez.
ma'am.
Naeem Rached, citizen of Newberry. Thank you once again, county and city. A couple of things I just wanted to address about, just comments on this going on. I'm a numbers guy. Marlo, you know that too. My city commission knows I'm all numbers, I'm all facts. So, yeah, can we put every ambulance because the numbers of students are in downtown? Absolutely. But then where does that leave us? Where does that leave Alachua? Where does that leave High Springs? Where does that leave throwing a rock to Marion County? You're stuck. And I don't want that for you. As much as people might dislike certain individuals here, we're all human beings. We deserve at least something. And the fact that a city is willing to spend its money to build a facility to house a unit, incurring that expense themselves instead of passing it on to the county, I think that's leverage enough to say, hey, listen, somebody's doing their part. They're not asking for everything. They're trying to meet us somewhere here in the middle. And I think that has some leverage to do with the fact that we are a growing city and we're rapidly growing. We need these services. I'm a numbers guy, and the cost of an ambulance ride is way expensive to the point that I don't really like listening to NPR, but NPR just made an announcement the other day about how Uber in big cities has been taking over ambulance calls because they don't want to pay for the ambulance ride. And these are happening in universities. Us rural people that live 20, 30 miles away from a hospital aren't going to pay for an Uber, let alone wait for an Uber to come here from Gainesville, especially when we're willing to build something for the ambulance. So I asked the county to please seriously consider the fact that here's a city meeting us, meeting you guys halfway, because we see it. We're numbers. We see the numbers. It costs money. But we are growing. We're at 6,000. And we're going to continue to grow. And Jonesville right now, GW just announced 400 new homes. 122nd, where the new facility of the hospital, that little medium, right down 122nd, how many other homes are going down there? How many ambulance calls are going to be taken up and be taken away from these sides of the cities? So we have to take into account that, and the fact that we build something should say that we are committed to the price here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Marchetti.
Any other public comment? We're going to merge our agendas a little bit because we all showed up with different. We're going to go ahead and get our CRA conversation underway. Brian, will you, putting you on the spot, will you make your way and lead us through the Newberry Community Redevelopment Agency? This is the agreement to enter into an agreement. I hope we have an agreement because we.
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, we've had an agreement for quite some time, but until the roads issue is settled, we weren't bringing it back. Basically, the update is the staffs have worked together over the months to come up with an interlocal agreement, a draft interlocal agreement. It was actually agreed upon and approved by the Newberry City Commission, I believe back in November. Actually, it may have been earlier than that. But given the time that's passed, if the agreement is brought back, it'd need to amend the base year to January 1st of 2019, because obviously January 1st of 18 is already passed. But just to reiterate some of the terms, it would be a 20-year term unless extended by both commissions. Both commissions have to approve the CRA plan and any amendments to the plan. And then the county would be matching the city contribution on a one-to-one basis. CRAs in the past, under the different legislation, the original legislation, The county contributed considerably more, and the city only contributed up to its millage rate. In this case, the city would contribute up to its millage rate, and the county would match whatever the city put in, but no more. And then the debt for the CRA, if the CRA took out any debt for projects, would not be able to exceed the remaining term of the CRA without additional approval from both commissions again. That way you can't create indebtedness that lives longer than the CRA actually. It excludes undeveloped tracts from directly receiving CRA funds. There are, I think, 5 undeveloped parcels that we've requested be that are in the proposed district. It's not the final district because we haven't actually got to the point where we've officially presented a district. Limits the administrative expenses to a total of 30% regardless of collections, and in the event of incurable default by the city or the county, either party either party can elect, the non-breaching party can elect to terminate the agreement and stop making contributions to the TIF fund. There's a process for mitigation that would go through an extended process before that could happen, but it does give an out if there is a irrevocable breach in the terms. And so once again, on the map, the currently proposed CRA district relative to the size of the city as a whole, that basically would include all of the old downtown area, greatest areas of blight, greatest areas of need, and that's basically the update at this point.
Commissioner Cornell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, thank you for all the work. I know you've worked on this, well, as long as I've been on this commission, 3 years. And I was a real pain in the patooey the first year, not just with Newberry, but with High Springs. I really dug in, and all these things have been reflected. I really just have one question. I'm looking at the backup of this sheet, and just so what you're looking at with a base year of 19, you're looking at a potential contribution by the county and the city in year 1 of $2,862.
Mr. Chair, the numbers that I ran, the initial numbers I ran, just to try to update that, went from the 2015 numbers to 17, and so because there has been some appreciation over the last couple of years in the total valuation for the district, it would be, by my initial numbers, which haven't been verified by finance yet, but it'd be about $2,900.
Okay.
That first
And
year.
then that grows all the way to year 4 to what? This number says 11,700.
Year 4, and the updated numbers, I have about $12,000.
Okay, and so, you know, I respect Commissioner Byerly's point of trying to get these lined up. I think we just passed a motion, though, to try to resolve the roads in the next 60 days. So I'm ready to move forward. I'd go ahead and move that we move forward with the City of Newberry to implement the CRA as presented.
Okay, we motion, Commissioner Hudson.
Mr. Chair, I think that's our option.
Okay, you conclude, Hudge. Commissioner Brown.
So I'm closing in on supporting this. I think we're getting very, very close. I would respectfully ask, however, that we not vote on this tonight. This affects everyone in the county. Everyone potentially contributes to this, and our agenda doesn't say anything about voting on this. It says here a presentation. The appropriate thing for us to do is to bring this back to Board of County Commissioners commission vote where everyone can come and learn about it and hear about it on TV, and then vote in that context. And again, we're kind of delinking this from the roads issue, and it sounds like I thought we were going to have an agreement on both in 60 days when we could kind of vote on them together. That seems fair and more reasonable to me. And again, I've heard this board recently complain about items coming up for action that were on the agenda. So I would ask that we not vote on this tonight, and I have a couple of questions.
Commissioner Hudson and Commissioner Cornell.
Well, I have a couple. I'll yield.
Well, I can say, we were taking any final action about what appropriate needs to happen. Correct. The other ones are trying to staff, board communities to work together to bring back draft agreement.
But it's not what I heard. It's not the motion I heard.
So I would, may I? mean, I would amend that to bring it back within 60 days, but that was my intention.
I'll support that. but
Yeah,
the
my
motion
intention
made
was-
For us to approve this deal.
So my intention was to move forward with staffs to draft up an agreement and present it back to us at the same time.
With the roads.
Yeah, at the roads within 60 days.
That's
Mr.
fine.
Chair, could I ask, it seems to me, from Newberry's perspective, we've been talking about this CRA for over a decade. And we have, I know that some of you have some questions on it, but it would, I think it would behoove us all if we could link these two and say, when you approve the roads, this one, if you guys could vote tonight that once the road deal is approved, this one clicks in automatically.
Well, I
Would you
think
be willing to make that motion,
Yeah,
to amend your
Commissioner
motion?
Byerly's point, I mean, there's actually no one more supportive of the CRAs than Commissioner Byerly. And so I think the idea here that we can approve both of these within 60 days, I'm fine with, and if we do it at the county commission, I think that gives, to Commissioner Byerly's point, the entire county the ability to come and speak to that. And so my intention was that I think we've worked out most of these items. I think we're gonna be bringing back the roads in 60 days, and so my intention was, and I modified my motion, to have staff work on bringing these agreements back to us within 60 days at the same time as the roads as presented.
Everyone in the
Are
county.
you okay with that?
But,
Every-
Yeah, I would say 60 days is not on the point, because that means it's right at, adoption.
Staff have the roads back to us. If they can have us back by June 30th.
And I would simply remind everybody in the audience that all we're talking about here with the CRA is an agreement to enter into an agreement, to start working on an agreement. So this is not the final, this is just an agreement to enter into an agreement. So
But to be
that's
clear-
after 10 years, we're trying to get an agreement to enter into an agreement.
But if I may, as you know, you've been in this long enough to understand the point at which things take on an insurmountable momentum. And once we agree to this, it's done, because we've all essentially committed to the
Could we
concept.
have that on the record right there? Because I just want to make sure we get that. Because this has been done, the CRA has been done, and in our board's effort to be magnanimous and give you guys a way to create a model to get rid of roads for municipalities, these two got welded together. And so I'm just trying to keep our goodwill moving together and see if we can, I mean, I would, if 45 days is okay, I would love that. I would love 30 days, because I believe that
is that okay?
we
Michelle?
are on the
45?
cusp of both
Yeah,
of these.
the-
There's
the-
not much left.
The interlocal on the CRA is actually
Done.
done. I mean,
We've already voted on it.
Right, there's very little there. And then, so the bigger issue is getting the roads agreement hammered out between, not so much between staffs. I think we know where we're at with what we want to see in the agreement, but getting it all put to writing where, both of, not just staff, but the attorney's offices are satisfied that it's memorialized in a way that meets our intent. So I think we can get that done. Ultimately, I don't think this has much of a big impact from a budget perspective. For FY19
$11,000 in 4 years. I mean, if,
for FY19, I don't think it has a big budget impact, but we can certainly bring it back in 45 days or before
Okay.
that.
Continue?
Yes.
Okay. And let me just say, there's no reason why the Newberry City Commissioners should concern themselves with what I'm about to say, but county commissioners have to constantly remind themselves that everyone in the county is going to be an equal payee into your CRA. Everyone's going to pay equally into your CRA if we take this step. And we should be thinking about that. We're supposed to represent everyone, and this is why I ask these questions, and I have two. That map that shows the areas that are blight, we kind of discussed this early on, like a year or two ago, from when it finally started getting down to real discussions. Are we in agreement, or city and county staff in agreement on the definition of the blighted areas? Just a question, Earl. Because I remember at the time it included substantially undeveloped parcels. And I don't know that we ever resolved these issues, and I just want to ask the question now rather than waiting until it's back in our chambers.
Mr. Chair, basically, we haven't agreed, and this is just representational of the general draft proposal district. The interlocal agreement does nothing to solidify a district in any way, shape, or form. The next step if the interlocal agreement were to be approved tonight, it's still going to be at least 6 months before we end up having a plan that's going to be improved. The plan, which includes the actual boundary, which is negotiated with both commissions, and so all the interlocal agreement that has already been hashed out does is say, okay, now you have the permission to go forward. Come back with a finding of necessity. Come back with your actual plan, which includes the proposed district, which then is hashed out in its final state. It's going to be, even if you approve this tonight, it's going to be months before the CRA plan and everything else is approved by both commissions, hammered out. All the details for that'll be the next round, and so.
And that point has been made a number of times, but I'm still asking the question, and I don't know if our staff has anything to say about it, but I don't think it's premature to ask if we have agreement on the areas, because you're putting a map up in front of us.
I
You
guess
did put a map up, so I'm just asking, do we have consensus on the blighted areas? And respectfully, I'm turning to my staff.
Mr. Chair, the answer is no. The city commission has not made a finding of necessity. They have not put forward the data and analysis that's necessary to show that certain areas fall under the definition in the statute for blighted, slum or blighted, and we haven't reviewed that analysis.
I just want to,
Made it.
I knew that was the answer, thank you, and I just wanted to get that on the record tonight so that everyone understands going in. I don't want any hard feelings later. You said you were going to do this. Well, we haven't made those critical decisions yet. I want everyone to just to know that we still have that work to do. My second question, if you could back up one slide, maybe 2 slides, I don't remember. Yep, right there. Excludes undeveloped tracts from directly receiving CRA TIF. What does that mean?
There were, I believe it was 5 tracts total that county commissioners had indicated some concern over, that because they had not been developed specifically, that they were undeveloped, that no TIF money, that they could be included in the district, but no TIF money would go into the actual on-site development of those parcels, because they haven't been developed and it's supposed to be redevelopment money. And so now there are vacant parcels throughout the proposed district, and even in the core blighted areas there are going to be some vacant parcels that were not included in that list, but there were, I believe it was 5 parcels specifically that were excluded from directly receiving TIF funds for that reason.
I guess this is going to be a legal question. What's the difference between directly and indirectly? And I don't know what that means. I don't know if anyone can answer it tonight, but I thought
well, for instance, as an example, you would not be able to expend TIF funds on those parcels to extend infrastructure onto those parcels, or to.
What would be an example of an indirect benefit?
Indirect would be anything that specifically would benefit that property, but you're not spending money specifically on that property, I guess.
Mike, you want to come up to the mic?
It occurs to me that if you have a city block with one vacant lot and CRA money is used to upgrade the water main from one end of the block to the other, it's not directly spent on site for any improvement on that lot, but that lot indirectly improves from the upgraded water main. So that might be an example of indirect benefit.
And the only concern I would have is because the examples of the undeveloped parcels that I'm working from memory now, there's mostly to the eastern side of the town, some relatively large areas that are kind of they're just large undeveloped areas. Maybe at the time that this comes back for us to consider, will staff have worked out a good definition of direct and indirect benefits?
Mr. Chair, all of that will be basically worked out in the actual plan, and I guess all I can say is that it seems a little premature to get into the details of what the district is actually going to look like when those details are what's hashed out during the actual plan development process, not the interlocal process.
I respectfully disagree. I don't think it's premature to discuss these concepts. I haven't got a map with the parcel asking you to take this one in and get that one out. I'm asking you, how are we going to define direct and indirect benefits? because the central policy issue is whether or not to allow these funds to be spent on the raw parcels of land. And we've talked about this. And I just want to give advance notice. When we come to the last day, and then I want to hear that these issues are new. So I hope our staffs can work them out. I'll keep watching. Thank you.
Before we move to Commissioner Martin's question, I just want to, in the interest of getting it on the record, to Commissioner Byerly's point about the CRA is we are asking for the rest of the county to subsidize us. Our board respectfully disagrees with that point, and we've hashed out those arguments both sides. I'm sure no one wants to hear us go through that again, but we do respectfully disagree with that point. And I would say to your question about how do you ask that, I would ask a different rhetorical question only meant for your own reflection. How do you answer the questions of my residents when they say that we're the only municipality in the county that has asked for a CRA for over a decade and have not received it? So if there's an interest of fairness, and every other municipality that has worked towards this has received their CRA, much nicer CRAs, much more beneficial CRAs, and we have paid for the sins of those other cities, how do you answer that question? Especially hard on the heels, and it's a rhetorical question. I'm not, it's meant for you to reflect on. I know we got a long line of people who want to make a comment, but once again, you know, we're the only one that hasn't. So, Commissioner Martin?
Yes, and I mean, not that I need to be defensive because I don't think it was offensive initially, but I mean, we were paying into other CRA if you kind of follow that line, but at this point, I could not care less about the CRA. I mean, the amount of time that we have in this room and manpower that we have put in, woman power that we have put into this is, I mean, it's just ridiculous at this point. And if it's a matter of unlocking it, which I never locked it to the roads deal, the roads deal has so much higher value for all of us than the CRA thing. And I just, if we can't get some agreement tonight, I would just be supportive of killing it altogether. It's just not, it's not worth it to me. It's not worth it to the citizens, I don't think.
Conclude. Commissioner Cornell.
I was just going to amend my motion to, like I said, approve what's already been agreed to and bring it back to the county commission by June 30th. If the seconder agrees. Chuck?
And that's the same day as it. Okay, Commissioner Coleman.
Reflecting on Commissioner Martin, I could care less about the CRA. We have, I don't know how much staff time we got into this, but I know it's ridiculous. And once again, tying this with the roads are so much more important. I rode to Debbie's. She's not here today. Rode out that way the other day. It's just crazy. Whatever way it goes, it goes. It should not have been tied with our roads.
Commissioner Farnley.
And I agreed with Commissioner Martin and Coleman also. CRAs, I don't care about it at all. It's not worth the trouble or the time.
Well, we've already voted in favor of it. So what we're saying is, if this is going to be tied to any other issues, if we have to, if we have to commit massive amounts of more staff time to address these concerns, if it's a leverage point, at this point we would just like an up or down vote on the CRA. Again, over 10 years of the city of Newberry asking and working and trying to meet your concerns. I was looking at a different city planner when we first, and he had already spent multiple years on the CRA. So I think what my board is trying to express is that we simply don't want to see this leveraged against anything else. The CRA for us at this point is so watered down compared to other CRAs that it was never a good negotiating point to tie it to the roads anyway, and it caused some ill will since we feel like we were the magnanimous partners on that, since no other entity in your history has offered to a mechanism by which to take over the deeds. that's what I think that we've already voted in favor of it. So if there's any will on your board to tie it to any other issues or to ask our staff to do any much more work to see this thing to fruition, then at that point. But I think we have got this thing pretty close again to entering into an agreement to go forward with an agreement. So that's what, we've already voted in favor of it. We sent it to you months ago. So that's what I appreciate. Commissioner Cornell's motion, I think it was seconded. I appreciate the second. I think that we can move forward with that, and we'll see each other in 45 days and see how it goes from there.
Dr. Herzl?
Yeah, being the new guy on board, I don't have the time and effort invested that my more senior members do, but being briefed on it, it seems like a ridiculous amount of time that it's taken to get to this point. The fact that we're asking for information about something that hasn't yet even been finalized that we can talk about seems like circular logic, and I'm going to say it out loud. It's a failure of county government if we don't get this done tonight, and you'll be demonstrating to the citizens of Newberry that you can't follow through on an effort that has been so ongoing for so long when the city board of Newberry has made such a great effort to try and get this accomplished and given up so much to get it done.
Okay. Any further comments? Any public comments on the motion?
On the motion on the floor,
Which is
45 days.
45 days to bring it back with the same time that we're going to hear about the roads. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion's unanimous.
We don't need a motion on our side because we already made that motion. All right. So we will be back on the agenda that we have. We'd like to give you guys an update on our law enforcement contract. I believe Mr. New is going to lead the charge on this one. We have an hour until we need a motion to extend the meeting. So
I'll be surprised if we extend, if this conversation goes that long. This is just a briefing of where the city of Newberry is in its law enforcement contract. As you'll recall, about 2 years ago, we opted out of the MSTU for law enforcement, and we entered into a contract with Sheriff Darnell that was a one-year term. At the end of that term, we entered into a 3-year term. We were in the first year of that. This information is all on the backup, but our currently we were paying $777,000 a year for law enforcement services in Newberry. That's a 5% increase over last year's contract cost. For that, what the city of Newberry receives in terms of law enforcement is a term called advanced patrol, which simply guarantees that the Foxtrot Zone Deputy, which is most of western Alachua County, it's about 120 square miles, is the zone of this is the size of the zone. That deputy will be in Newberry, which is about 55 square miles. So we cut Foxtrot in half, and for the most part, the zone deputy stays there, and that's 24/7, 365 service. We have SRDs, which has turned out to be incredibly important to Newberry residents, school resource deputies, in each of Newberry schools. That is not a requirement under the normal law enforcement. The sheriff puts deputies kind of as she sees need, and so sometimes elementary schools may not have that. Newberry's residents were particularly impassioned about school resource deputies and were willing to pay to have resource deputies in each of our 3 schools. We also get 5 crossing guards, 5 school crossing guards, and some support with some of the Newberry parades and special events, things of that nature. We get an annual State of the City of Newberry report from the sheriff and quarterly reports. So we anticipate moving forward, since we have a 3-year agreement, that the next 2 years we already know what the price will be. Both parties really like the certainty of that. We just write that number into our budget, and we don't have to worry about it, protracted negotiations or kind of getting to the end of your budget cycle and wondering, will we have law enforcement next year or not? So we really like the certainty of all that. And I guess I would, during the last cycle, when we were negotiating, we also accepted a proposal from the city of High Springs to provide a limited suite of law enforcement. At the time, the city of High Springs could only provide school resource deputies, by state law, they were not eligible to provide law enforcement services in Newberry. So it was kind of an apples and oranges type of offering. But in the end, our residents and our commission decided that we wanted to stick with the sheriff for law enforcement, and that's how we ended up in this contract. This fiscal year, the commission authorized and funded a report outlining the process and the estimated cost to establish a municipal police department within Newberry. And so we are working on that and plan to share that with our commission, that report sometimes over the summertime during our budgeting process. But we do not plan to make a recommendation to begin law enforcement in any time in the next 2 fiscal years while we live out the duration of our contract with Sheriff Darnell. I'm available for questions and hope the overview will suffice.
We've heard this update, so you guys have any questions about this?
Any public input?
Sorry. Under the contract that you're finalizing now with the sheriff, I guess, what would per capita payment for law enforcement be, or I should say to the sheriff, as opposed to an unincorporated area resident?
I don't think that we know the answer to that. We started with the base year in our initial contract of what was the city of Newberry paying for the service through the MSTU, and we established that as a baseline. And then all of our negotiations beyond that point are what are the increases that the sheriff's department is realizing. Since we're all in the government business, we know that, you know, what happens with health insurance and what happens with like our fire department. They are special risks, so we see what happens with their retirement types of things. So just like our commission asks every other department within the city to justify increases beyond a normal cost of living increase, we've asked the sheriff. And so if the sheriff comes to us with a 20% increase, we'd say, why is that? And she'd say, there's a law that changed, and we have to do, like in fire protection, it was the 2 in, 2 out law. You couldn't have 2 firemen respond to a fire. You couldn't have 3. You needed to have 4 respond. That was a game changer. And so if there's a significant increase in costs requested, we would ask for justification for that.
Maybe I should ask the question this way. Everyone pays a portion of their sheriff-driven services, including the jail, including detective, including patrol, through general fund, and a portion of it through the MSTU. So the issue, you're going to pay the general fund regardless. So
That's
the really
correct.
issue is about the MSTU. What I'm trying to understand is, from someone who's on this side of your municipal line, on the outside, they pay the MSTU. What will the corresponding value for the city of Newberry be?
We have not analyzed it in that perspective whatsoever.
Part of the difficulty in this conversation to try to answer the question is the amount of transparency that we're able to get when it comes to these numbers. So we've struggled to figure that out. We know the cost of services based on the numbers that she's given.
The question I'm asking is even simpler than that. If the person inside the city, if you didn't do anything, if you just opted into the MSTU, you'd know what they pay. It's a very simple math problem. And then you should also be able to predict what they're going to pay under your system. I'm just asking I'm guessing that it's lower or you wouldn't be doing it. So I'm trying to find out what kind of discount the city of Newberry is getting for the contract as opposed to the MSTU. Again, under the assumption that my job is to represent everyone.
Perhaps the best person there would be to ask the sheriff.
Or do you know that number?
Yeah, I think the answer to that would be no discount, because we've taken the sheriff's numbers for the service that she's provided, her numbers, and we've worked from her numbers up, and we're providing the cost. So the 5% increase that she got this year was double the rate of municipal law, our county level law enforcement average in the state was 2.6 something. We gave a 5% increase to meet those needs. But when you go in the numbers and you say we have 1 24/7 patrol, we have 3 SROs. I've never heard SRDs, by the way, but SROs, and you count up every single thing that she's providing for us, and we're paying the full freight of it. So if we pay for an SRO, we pay for the 24, we pay the entire year training. We're paying for the bullets that are, I mean, we're paying for everything, and that's where we get to that number. So I think what you're saying is, how do your negotiators and our negotiators negotiate different numbers. And I don't know the answer to that question. I just know the answer that when she gives us her cost for services, and we add up all those costs for services, we're paying the full freight of every service that she provides to the city of Newberry, which is also arguable since through your property taxes, you still get the one patrolling deputy. So in essence, we're paying twice for that deputy. So we pay through our property tax for the one patrolling deputy, and then we count up that person's salary, and we pay again to have them here in Newberry.
And Mr. Mayor, you brought up a point. With regards to the SRDs, we did some GIS work and determined that somewhere around 50% of the students that are attending Newberry schools actually live in unincorporated Alachua County and pay or into a community that pays into the MSTU. So they're paying for their share of that SRO through the MSTU, and Newberry, through its agreement, is actually paying the full freight and board for the SROs in those schools. And a case could be made. We feel comfortable with the number that we've agreed to, but a case could be made that those SROs are being paid for a time and a half, full time by the city and a half time by those students that are attending Newberry High School whose families live in MSTU areas.
And I have heard you make your case before, and I know that there's a different way to look at the same case.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're having discussions, and that's why the sheriff and the city of Newberry and Alachua County don't necessarily agree on this issue. And I'm really not trying to be that complicated or rehash that discussion tonight. So I guess I'll just move that the county commission request that our staff provide an answer to the question that I'm asking. Do I need to repeat it? Let us know, compare the costs for the MSTU-driven services in the unincorporated area with the rates that folks inside the city of Newberry will be paying.
So are you asking for what the MSTU would have generated as opposed to what's being paid?
If they just paid the MSTU like to everyone else in the unincorporated area, then this is what the city of Newberry would pay. And if under the agreement they've reached, what are they paying? That's all I want.
Okay, Mr. Mayor? You had a motion, to get a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Do you have a question on this motion, Commissioner Farnsworth, or a comment just about the issue?
Comment about the issue.
Okay, you want to finish up your
Yeah,
motion?
any more discussion? Any public discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
One of the points is that you're comparing apples to oranges since the city is paying extra for the extra sheriffs, and we're paying for the SROs, and the people in the unincorporated area are just paying for MSTU or supposedly a sheriff to patrol that area. So you're not really, it's not real comparable. You can't, there's two different things.
It should. Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to this issue, the question is not a question that should be directed to Newberry. I think the question needs to be directed at a different entity. We have gone over the numbers and over the numbers and over the numbers, and being as generous as we can be, our numbers dictate fairly close to the number that we are paying. So I understand the point of the commissioner's line of questioning, but I think it's directed at the wrong body, and there's nothing that we can do to answer those concerns. I mean, we can take you through the exact same slide after slide after slide that we've sat through, and there's just no way you can add the numbers up to get to the numbers that you're, and I understand you got a different side, but the way we've done it over and over and over again, we just can't, we can't get there.
The short answer to the point that you're raising is that you're essentially picking a menu of options that you want and adding up the costs. Everyone else in the county pays the entire cost, including the services they don't necessarily receive. They pay for the sheriff's office.
Which would speak to your point that the MSTU should be less.
Sometimes they get more, sometimes they get less on a given service or a given issue. And in order to have a robust law enforcement presence, you have to pay for all those things. You can't just say, well, this neighborhood over here, all they need is this, so that's what we're going to pay for. You pay for the entire sheriff's office. So that's, from my perspective, is if every community in the county did what you did, we'd wind up with probably 75% of the total budget we now have for sheriff. And
I'd
so
love to
everyone would
respectfully
have,
disagree. We've been doing that a lot tonight.
And Mike,
seems straightforward to me. If everyone did what you did,
Seems straightforward to me as well.
If you're paying less and you feel like it justifies the cost, then everyone in the county's paying too much.
okay, this is really an issue, Mike, between
I
the
let it
sheriff
go,
and
but,
I.
you know,
Yeah, it's
I
really,
asked
it's,
our question,
it's between the sheriff and
I asked
us.
our staff the question.
Okay.
Commissioner Coleman, you have a comment to wrap up this issue?
All this right here is the reason I voted for High Springs. The transparency is not there with our sheriff's department, our sheriff. That has no reflection on our deputies, just like last time. But it was like we were beating our head against the wall, and that's why I went with High Springs on that very reason.
Thank you. Any public comment on what's going on with law enforcement? We got 2 years of stability ahead of us. That's the message we want to take away. All right, we'll move on to the Newberry, Alachua County Trail Network. A good issue to end on.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair. My name is Chris Dawson. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Alachua County Growth Management Department. I have a brief hour-long presentation for you. I'm going to try and be as brief through this as I can, commissioners.
We'd appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, I'm here at the request of the City Commission to just provide a brief update on what activities Alachua County is doing from a planning perspective for trails in Alachua County and how those things tie in here in the city of Newberry. And so I have a presentation, and I'm going to go through most of it really briefly, and I'd be happy to answer questions on any of those things that I kind of passed through. The County Commission's seen this before, so this is more just enlightenment for y'all. Where's my clicker here? Here we go. Okay. So I'll just say that Alachua County's comprehensive plan has many references to trails, not just in reference to sort of regional trails, but also within the county and how those trails can tie together different uses that are in the county, whether those are schools or parks. Trails are a unique method to be able to get people places when either they don't have a car or they choose to not use one, or when they're just out for recreation purposes. During our evaluation and appraisal process, the county has identified that we're interested in developing a green infrastructure plan. That's something that staff is working on now. And part of that green infrastructure plan is to look at the multitude of documents that we have existing to date that deal with trails. So whether that's our recreation master plan, our bicycle pedestrian master plan, or any of our other documents, and try to pull them together in a little bit more coordinated manner to look at our trail network and our transportation system to make sure that we're doing all the things we've said that we were going to do. So part of that is also identifying funding, whether that be at a local or a state level or a federal level. And we have tried to sort of build in not just what's in the county, but also how those tie in to the individual cities. So the map that is up right now is is the adopted Greenways and Trails plan. This is the Priority Trails Network, focused mostly in Alachua County. It also ties into the counties around us, so to the northeast in Bradford County, to the east in Putnam, to the west in Gilchrist, and the northwest in Union, I think, Union County. And so we have done a lot of investigation of naming these projects, of looking for funding for them. We have looked at identifying and constructing trails. So since 2002, we've constructed approximately 45 miles of multi-use path in Alachua County, 70 miles countywide, 45 just in the unincorporated area. We have 5 miles funded for construction in the next several years. And we've tried to kind of look at those trails that are the easiest to construct, so not necessarily always acquiring new rights-of-way, but building them in existing rights-of-way or rail lines where it's easy to make them happy. So as I mentioned, we'll be developing a countywide green infrastructure plan that will help the county tie into the other municipalities, not just the city of Gainesville, but also all of our other municipalities. And we'll be looking to develop a master plan that works with all of those cities. In terms of Newberry's tie-in to that, there are 4 projects for which the county has applied for SunTrail funding. For those of you who aren't aware, SunTrail is a state program. It's funded $25 million annually by the state, and there are specific corridors. That's the Greenways and Trails Priority Trail Network. Those are the only projects that are eligible for funding. We identified 4 projects that tie in here in Newberry. One of those is the High Springs to Newberry rail corridor. The State Road 26 corridor from Jonesville basically to Newberry Lane is where we ended that. Newberry Lane to downtown, which would be sort of in that PD&E, whatever happens with one-way pairs down here. We'd hope some SunTrail money is used to kind of tie into the larger network. And then also downtown to Gilchrist County. So those are the 4 projects that we looked at, and we actually came here about 18 months, maybe 2 years ago, and talked to you about all those projects. And we appreciate you providing us with your support as we applied for those. Unfortunately, none of those have been funded yet. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about the sort of economic development impact of trails and the kinds of things that you might expect to see as our regional trail builds out. So as we tie into all of our communities, we expect to see more people coming here to use those trails specifically. So those are things like bike shops or coffee shops, small scale retail really. You might also see, bed and breakfasts, those kinds of things, breweries or tasting rooms to some extent. And also then your redevelopment, where you'll start to see some of those maybe underutilized existing structures within the city, not just Newberry, but in our other cities as well, to be sort of rebuilt, if you will, to be upgraded so that they're more attractive. And also just sort of realizing that new uses within all of our cities is going to equate to new revenue for our cities. So those things are important. With that, I would just wrap up that part, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that either of the commissions might have.
Does our board have any questions? Commissioner Farnsworth?
With the bike trails and all, when you get funding from the state, can you also incorporate like an area for the long distance bikers to camp or have a restroom or anything like that? Is that part of that
Mr.
deal?
Chair, I'm not aware of an example where there's been camping, like a camping area constructed as part of a trail like that.
Yeah,
So
where
a
they
lot
put
of
a tent
those,
up or something.
well, a lot of those trails connect to other sites that might already be used for camping. So state parks, for example. So I'm not aware of where that's happened, but I can certainly look into it.
It isn't the idea to make the distances short enough that they can get to a municipality and spend some money.
Yeah, I think
Right, so
that's
get a
what
hotel.
all of our
Right.
municipalities are looking for. Yes, Mr. Chair, for sure. Yep.
Any other questions from our board? Mr. Chair, are you looking for anything from us tonight except just to give us that update?
I think we were just looking to give you all the update on what was happening.
All right. Well, looks like a great project. We
Thank
wish
you,
you
Mr.
the
Mayor. I
best of
appreciate
luck
it.
for
Thank
it,
you.
and we were happy to give you the letter to
Thank you, Mr.
say we
Dawson.
support the concept. Okay. Are we
Commission General
Commission
comments.
General? Would your commission like to guess first?
Commissioner Cornell?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for having us out here. I sit on the Tourist Development Council and for the whole county. And Newberry is a really, really important part of the entire county when it comes to hosting events and activities from, the Easton facility to Canterbury to the ball fields. You are valuable and important, and we appreciate that. So however I can help you with regard to tourism, reach out to me. I'm the county commissioner that sits on that board. Secondly, and more on a personal note, I appreciate the invitation to the vigil for Gilchrist County, and I told the mayor this story. I may have told Commissioner Martin, but on my way out here, it was amazing to see the streets lined, really all the way back into 98th Street, which is, getting closer to Gainesville. There were folks on both sides of the street. I stopped at the red light of 241 and Newberry Road, and there was a lady, and she rolled down her window and she said, "What's going on?" I mean, there were literally people on all sides. And then when you got out to Newberry, your whole town was here. She said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Newberry." She said, "Newberry?" I said, "Yeah, Newberry. They're paying respects to the fallen officers." She started crying. She said, "I'm from Trenton." And she rolled up her window and she just drove on down the road. And then when I got to Newberry, there was the whole town. I saw the mayor out there. And so I just want to let you all know that Newberry represented Alachua County and continues to stand with Gilchrist, and certainly our sheriff, you know, she sent her resources over there to their sheriff, and it was just nice to see that, and I just wanted to tell you all that story. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hutchison.
So, about Canterbury, my understanding is that there's interest by some folks in Newberry City that's acquiring use, and I know that others are working on it. There's a group of questions that pulled me into a couple of meetings about it, and one conclusion that I came to was that there's a lot of interest in continuing these operations from the Western side, but there wasn't necessarily any group that got popped on for us. It was organized and designed to operate. So if somebody, government or some entity, stepped forward to purchase it, it was unclear exactly who would operate it and what the conditions. Newberry talked about whether we have either interest in operating it or not interest in operating it. It is required.
Can I take this one? Canterbury has been a topic of conversation periodically for years. I think we've proven here tonight that we're willing to entertain any conversation. As far as the level of detail of what you're talking about, I'm not aware of any conversation that's gotten into that level of detail about operating it and those kinds of things. I think certainly Newberry cares about Canterbury and wants that entryway into Newberry to stay equestrian, and I think it's the only equestrian center in the county. So it's kind of it fits a niche, but I think the board would be willing to have that conversation with you guys. If you guys want to have it, we can have our staffs chat and see what's out there. Would you be interested in that?
We're sending people out here.
Well, a lot of them are already using Canterbury, but there's a couple of different, I don't tend to understand the portion.
I don't know either.
A lot of different groups, and right now there's no obvious concession there.
The Canterbury people, every time I've talked to them, because they've been the ones that generally are the folks that are questing after some entity. Now they're not for profit, they are a profit entity, but they have always predicated their conversation with they would like to stay and run it and seek out an even greater level of profit because they feel like it's an underutilized park. They could do more with it if they had some backing. So I'm not exactly sure that meets what you're talking about, because they're obviously a for-profit entity. But they might be willing to become a non-for-profit and put that revenue back into the park But that would be the kind of conversation that we could ask our staffs to have, see if there's an entity out there that would like to be interested in it.
And the other thing I'll bring up to the county commissioners is that we have a neighboring facility very much like Canterbury, or the Eagle Fair, and some of those things that we talked about in terms of the animal and agriculture that represents most of that is located in western Alachua County. So in terms of
No, that's incorrect. You got Windsor, you got Micanopy, you got Hawthorne. Truthfully, Hutch, the youth fair is where it needs to be because it's pretty centrally located, as far as it takes care of eastern and western, northern and southern. So, it's in a good place as far as being centrally located. So.
What I was going to suggest is that there may be a way for us to, the county to justify using Canterbury for events where we need to have that kind of facility at a fairground.
Commissioner Martin.
Commissioner Martin.
I'm not sure who else. My daughter actually shows at the youth fair, and what I see is western Alachua County and eastern Alachua County there. There is, and I haven't had any real discussion with anybody about the equestrian thing that you started off with, but I will tell you that there'd be some interest in having it over here, the youth fair over here, but I think it totally is going to excommunicate the folks on the eastern end of the county, and I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that happen. But to your point, if the dollars can be spent better utilizing that facility, right now it's in private hands with Gary Weisman, so that's discussion with him. If I'm not mistaken, some of the fair board had approached him, but he was hesitant because of the paneling that's used for the arena and things has to get put in the ground, and he was concerned about the holes that were there that might get covered up by soft dirt that a horse can get into on a later event. I think if those things can be addressed, then there's probably some viability there. The only other thing that comes to mind is when there was some discussion about putting the county fair there. That really set off some alarm bells from a potential crime source issue. So I think if it's just the livestock fair, that probably has more wheels. I think that has more wheels than anything. Understood.
I just want to say that this issue came up in a meeting I had earlier today, and I think what you're suggesting is a very productive. It says it's on. What you're suggesting is a very productive way to think about this. We've been trying to solve all of our needs for a fairgrounds in one space, and it may be that it makes more sense to build a smaller facility and outsource some of the other things we want to do there, either with new facilities or making better use of other facilities in the community. So I agree with that approach, and I think we ought to pursue it. And I was going to bring up the fairgrounds tomorrow for a different reason anyway, so maybe we can discuss it after our meeting.
Okay, Commissioner Coleman.
I've heard several times tonight that, extending the olive branch and, let's get closer. I know this is beating a dead horse, but I think I'm challenging you five right now. You think you're good at your position and you're not having to worry about voters. Man up, I'm giving you a football analogy. Man up and put it on the ballot. Single member districts. Man up. If you're good at, all due respect, I don't have any representation. There's two here that don't even, well, one does, part of it. But the other one, he's out here, Ken Cornell. I'll call him, he's out here. The rest of you guys, gentleman here that's supposed to be represented, I ain't never seen you at any dadgum thing here. So long story short is, man up. Put it on the ballot, guys. I've been a commissioner for 4 years, and I've heard every story. And I know what the story is. The story is that you got the students. Put it on a single member district and see. I guarantee you at least the citizens of Newberry will have representation then. That's all I got.
Okay.
It sounded like we had some desire from both boards to have our staffs look for what's out there in the area of a not-for-profit, what ways that we can encourage and help. Did I have a head nod do we need a motion to ask our staffs to talk about that conversation?
Mr. Mayor, why don't we have the discussion? It sounds like we're going to have one.
You guys have that, and then
then
y'all deal with it.
And then we'll get back with you.
All I know is they got a $10,000 truck pulling a $50,000 trailer with a $200,000 horse. None of that makes any sense to me. So, all right. Does my board have any Dr. Herson, you got any?
I am aware of it. There's a petition by a dressage group that would like to keep Canterbury as an equestrian center, and so yes, and you are correct that they do have at least large assets. Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them are leaving on Wednesday morning too.
Commissioner Glanzer? Commissioner Coleman, you got it out of your system, so that was the one? All right. Yeah. Commissioner Farnsworth?
Just let you guys know, I appreciate you coming out and having this discussion, and I hope we can continue to work together and make things happen for both us and the county.
Commissioner Martin?
Sure. Quite honestly, tonight I am happy to see disagreements without being disagreeable. I think we have a right to be passionate about all of our responsibilities. I am more confident now than I ever have that we can cooperate moving forward. Tomorrow's a new day. I think on balance, our commissions overlap and agree on a whole lot of stuff. Our staff certainly overlap and agree on a whole lot of things, and you know, individual things are not predicated and don't poison the well for the majority of things that are moving forward. And just the fact that we can continue moving forward and helping each other, I think, is definitely in our best interest overall. So I'm otherwise extremely pleased tonight. I was very happy in the lead up to the meeting as well, and I've not been disappointed. So I really appreciate you guys working as hard as you do. I know you've got other stuff and a lot of things in front of you. We're not the only ones that you have to worry about. So I appreciate it when you have the opportunity to give us your ear that you do, and let's just keep it up.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Martin said it well. I want to thank you guys for Loft. I was in Washington, D.C. when you actually voted on that. I think it was a fair deal. I think it was the right deal. I think it treated everybody fairly. And now we have that 2-year mechanism, so I appreciate that. My citizens appreciate that. I appreciate the ability to work together tonight on some issues that I think help both of our residents, because sometimes we lose sight of that. Every resident that we serve is also y'all's resident, so every time you help us, you're helping your own residents as well, and we appreciate that. I do want to just say a huge thank you to your staff. Your predecessor was not as nice to work with. He had a very clear bar of we have to win, and everyone else has to lose. And since you've had a change of venue, it's been a how can we work together and advance, and I think it's been palpable for me the last year. So thank you. It's hugely beneficial to everybody, because we do work for the same people, and it's not about winning. It's about how do we both come to the table with skin in the game and create a fair outcome, as fair as possible, because you're absolutely right, Commissioner Byler. There's no way dealing with our business that you can come up with something that's perfectly equitable all the time. But we effort towards that, and I appreciate all of y'all. So, and I did not mean to skip over the chair here. Do you have a comment that you wanted to make?
I was just, I was responding to something that you said, Mr. Mayor, and that's as far as the gas tax was concerned. What we essentially did was we voted for y'all's plan, but it was, the way it was presented was that y'all were going to continue to talk as far as the League of Cities were concerned, and because we have heard from the other municipalities that were perhaps affected in a different manner, and they weren't as pleased. So, and we assured them that we were told that that y'all would continue to talk about it.
Well, my very first comment as the vice president of the League of Cities, I was newly elected. I have not had a chance to. Was very
don't
prestigious.
Shoot. Please don't shoot.
Was that I will live up to my promise to Mayor Surgency and Hawthorne, that if any of the other 5 municipalities can come up with a fairer plan, that we would be the first ones to champion that plan to you guys. I put it on the agenda. I brought it up, and I will continue periodically to check in with the mayors who have engaged to see if they have come up with that idea. To date, no one has been able to proffer a fairer way to go about this distribution, and I think you guys agree with that, which is why you voted in favor of it, because at the end of the day, it's the fairest solution that we have. So I've not dropped the ball on that, and we will continue every 2 years now to come back and make sure that we've got
And-
best plan in place.
And I will say that during the duration of my terms, there has definitely been an upswing as far as how we got along with the city of Newberry. It started out when I was first on there, had the whole cement plant, and that was not a high point with the relations, and since then it's done some there've been some ups and downs, but I think where we are right now, it is nice to see that we're working together. So thank you very much, and I think we're supposed to have citizen comments.
We are, yes. Citizen comments. Any opportunity to make a comment?
Beg your pardon?
Ooh, Peggy.
Sitting too long.
Sitting too long. You got up too fast there.
I did. Just a suggestion, maybe you'd like
Can
to
you
come to the...
introduce yourself, Miss Peggy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Peggy Loy. Maybe you'd like to come to the Watermelon Festival this weekend. Since there was a comment about our representative not coming to visit us very often. We have lots of things out here in Newberry that are kind of fun. That might be one of them.
Yeah, I challenge anyone who shows up to a seed spitting contest now.
we had.
Hey, he's
There's also a hog calling contest.
and
which
a hog calling contest
the
too.
champion is in this room.
Yes.
I can tell you that I participated with Commissioner Coleman at a watermelon eating contest a few years ago.
That's a brave man to go against him against it.
He kicked butt and took names, so.
All right.
I just want to tell you do have a wonderful community. I'm on first name basis with people at Hardee's.
And the best biscuits
And
in
they
the
have very good biscuits. So, and
Any
Rocky's
other
new
citizen
place is
comments?
really good too. So, thank you all very much for having us.
We appreciate you being here.
Our portion of the meeting is adjourned.
Adjourned as well.